My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash, 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 smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People schmiggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that... The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... Those... The smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Great Britain. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Ian Collins here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. And what a show we have coming up for you today. But before we get into the top lines, you need to remember that we want to hear from you, whether that be a phone call, whether that be a WhatsApp message, whether that be a WhatsApp voice note. And you do that by calling 0344 499 1000. You can also text in the word Talk at the start of your message to 87222. And you can follow us and message us on X at talkTV. Well, before I get to our friend on the show here in the studio with me, let's go through what we've got coming up in the first hour. The Prime Minister is under mounting pressure over small boats and asylum hotels, with a poll showing 71% of voters, including 56% of Labour voters, supporters, disapprove after more protests at the weekend. Meanwhile, 140 people were arrested on the first day of Notting Hill Carnival for offences including assaults on police, robbery and possession of weapons, 40% more than last year. And the Conservatives want passengers slapped with an on-the-spot fines for blasting what they call, and I quote, crap music or videos on buses and trains. I want to know from you with the big question of the day. Is Keir Starmer handling migration badly? Yes, no, and why? Call in 0344 499 1000. That's also the same number that you can WhatsApp us and send a voice note as well. 87222 if you want to text in with the word Talk at the start of your message. And finally, message and follow us on X at talkTV. Well, I'm joined in the studio by one of our favourite lefties here at Talk. He is a friend of ours. He is a great voice of common sense for the left, which is a very rare thing to say indeed. And someone I hope one day joins those green benches in the House of Commons. He is Mr. Matthew Torbett, former Labour advisor. Hello, Matthew, how are you?
Hello. Have you got any other favourite lefties? Is that what you're telling me?
I've got a few other favourite lefties.
The only one.
No, you're not the only one, Matthew. Don't worry, there's a few others I shamelessly flirt with every now and again. So you've got to treat them mean, keep them keen. You know,
exactly,
that's the methodology. Well, Matthew, look, we can't avoid it. The first story is the fact that this poll by YouGov for the Times found that 71% of voters think Keir Starmer is handling the asylum hotel issue badly, and that includes 56% of Labour supporters. Immigration and asylum now tops the public's issue list at 37%, ahead of the economy on 25% and the NHS at 7%. Quite remarkable, I think, that one in particular. It says ministers are setting out plans to speed up asylum appeals, as we saw in the Sunday papers, via independent adjudicators, with the fact there are 51,000 appeals pending as things are, and we've already got 32,000 illegal migrants currently in hotels as of the end of June. And of course, Labour come into this with the quite ugly backdrop of the fact that in their first year in office, we had a record 111,000 asylum applications in their first year, with 28,000 boat crossings for 2025, up 46% on 2024. I mean, statistically, Keir Starmer is failing.
Yes. I don't think it surprises anybody, really, if we're being honest. You look at the optics, you look at it, all you have to do is put on your TV every morning, you see the boats appear to be getting bigger. I couldn't believe it the other day when I seen it myself. Some of the figures I'm not as bothered about. 111,000 people applying for asylum. A lot of the world's at war. They see the UK as a safe country, somewhere where I think it's true, where you can still plan a nice life and get on in life, even those of us that are born.
Are you really not shocked or worried by 111,000 in 1 year claiming asylum?
Yeah, but it doesn't mean they're being granted necessarily. But what doesn't surprise me
But we know the
necessarily.
acceptance rate is around 63% on the first application. Then those who appeal, 48% of those appeals then get approved. So you've effectively got, realistically, an 8 in 10 chance of being able to stay in this country. I mean, that's just an abomination. That's migration through the back door.
Well, yes and no. I think it comes back to what I always say about the Asylum Convention. The 1945 Asylum Convention says the the only legal way you can claim asylum is to be here in this country. I feel at the moment we're in a different world from 1945 and the sort of persecution of Jews across Europe. And I think we need to maybe redefine, along with Europe, who are signatories to this convention, of what an asylum seeker truly is. Because there's so much war across probably half the world now when we think about it, and famine and all sorts of other things, is it the case that just because your country is in a bad way, you know, in Somalia or somewhere else, that you've got the right to flee and go somewhere else? Or is it a case of that's life, and maybe that's something we need to have a little look at? How you go about it, I think, is more complicated than me just saying that. I think in cases of war, I think people are certainly more sympathetic. And I think most people you speak to at these protests, when people are being vox-popped and otherwise, what they say, and you have to take them in you know, good faith, is we don't mind people that are genuine asylum seekers. I think it plays back in to that we don't know who these people are necessarily. We've heard and seen instances where people are throwing passports into the sea and all the rest of it, and we don't, and you know, you can claim to be from Afghanistan or wherever else. For me, the answer is offshore processing, and the fact that you allow people to go to the British embassy in their country, because if you're in trouble, that's maybe where you might head, whether it be Afghanistan or elsewhere, somebody where you're really in trouble. And it's a safe and legal route, which, you know, you look at things like Ukraine, people open their arms to people from Ukraine. It was a great thing, I think, that we did. And in a way are continuing to do so in many cases, certainly where I live. But people aren't sure whether these people are genuine or not. And I think it does down the people that are genuinely vulnerable, because you've got economic migrants sort of getting on the coattails.
And I think this is the problem, isn't it? Because I think if it were women and children that were predominantly coming across, I think this would be an entirely different conversation. The fact these are predominantly, and to use my own words, Matthew, not yours, fighting age men, as I would say, many of whom will come across with medieval attitudes towards women and girls, some of whom, as we know with the Hail Tale in Epping, two men in there have been accused of committing sexual offences. They, of course, deny those charges and will face a trial in the coming days or weeks or months ahead. We know that Baroness Casey's own audit suggested that more and more illegal migrants are coming up in these child rape gangs across the country. There is a significant risk. I mean, only recently we saw someone who came over from Afghanistan, having travelled almost as on a holiday around Europe, France, Italy and Germany, came across to this country on a small boat, has raped a 15-year-old girl, been convicted in court and is now awaiting sentencing in Edinburgh. The attack took place in September 2023. The safety of women and girls in particularly is at risk here, and as you say, they are, I think a lot of them are economic migrants. They are coming into work in the black market. The Sun uncovered earning up to £1,000 a week illegally through Deliveroo and other organisations like that, who are now obviously saying they're going to crack down, as well as the fact that we know that some of these people go missing. 20,000, the Centre for Migration has said, go missing into the ether, into the predominantly grey market, as they call it, and will be working illegally in the drug trade, for example. Isn't this just a serious safety issue? And it comes to the competency of a government, both the failure of the Conservatives, hence why they got their backside handed to them, rightly so. But now this will be the thing that hangs Labour's backside at the next election too, because it shows complete failure to do something as basic as control your borders.
So there's a few things there. I don't care where you're from. That's not to excuse anything. If you rape somebody, you're scum and you should be punished. It's rightfully so that these people, that's the case if that's happening. I think people become frustrated because they go, but maybe they shouldn't have been here in the first place. Totally get that. Medieval attitudes to an extent, depends. Different parts of the world, different ways of being. You know, I don't want to get too personal with this, but my partner's grandfather was a Muslim imam from Indonesia. His whole MO was almost quite European. He was, don't worry about arranged marriage, don't worry about go and get an education, go and be happy. That was his thing. There's a stereotype, and with every stereotype there's a kernel of truth. So there are people that are absolutely like that, and maybe it's the majority. Maybe my what would have been my grandfather-in-law was in the minority. Who knows? But at the same time, I would like to see consistency, because misogyny is not just an anti-West importation. the rise of figures like Andrew Tate alone show that actually we have issues in this country and the West as well. And I think violence against women and girls is a serious issue that we should cover across all the spectrums, wherever you're from, whatever your attitude, whatever your religion. And my worry is that some people, not all, use this as a cloak for bigotry, the same way that you get certain religions that are against gay marriage and they pretend it's their religion that is the issue rather than the fact they don't like gay people. And you get a bit of that, and they use it as a bit of a cloak. With regards to the black market and people disappearing, massive issue. We should see massive fines to a lot of these fast food delivering things, or taxi companies that, you know, I won't name. Which sort of brings the argument, which I'm struggling to see another way around it if we don't change the system, than if you've been waiting for a decision for 6 months or longer, up to 6 months, whether you give those people the right to part-time work and you sort of pay for yourself, rather than saying to the taxpayer we should subsidise these people, we don't know where they're from, they're coming over illegally, etc. This is if the system doesn't change, which I'm worried it won't. So it's a bit like being on universal credit. You're slightly subsidised, but you've got to pay your own way. And if you're that desperate, you're going to pay your own way because you don't want to go back to where you've come from, if you've fled war or whatever else. The final point I would make with a sort of slight pushback is the idea of fighting age men. Now, the question I would always pose to men like us is, would you put your partner in one of these dinghies? Because I wouldn't. And what you tend to find historically when people are genuinely fleeing, the man will go first, the woman will stay with family. I know you're going to share.
I don't agree with this, Matthew, but I'll let you finish it.
The man, you know, the family will stay with other family or whatever else. It's not like they've been left, you know, and the man's just gone off to do what he wants. And he will therefore send help. And the idea is there is a family tie to bring your wife and potentially child or whatever.
They would not
I won't be putting my kid in there.
There was not a cat in hell's chance I would leave my wife and children behind. I would do what most people should do, which is go to the nearest neighbouring country where you hope it would be safe and be able to claim asylum there whilst therefore waiting for, in like Ukrainians' case, where they hope the war will come to an end. So many of those people in this country who are Ukrainian will one day want to, from the conversations I've had, be able to return back to their sovereign nation, and we hope that obviously comes about. I mean, an interesting conversation, especially because this comes on the backdrop of Graham Stringer, MP, first Labour MP to come out publicly and say it's time for the UK to leave the ECHR. Quite a bold thing, albeit Graham was a very notable Brexiteer, so of sound stock, I would say, therefore. Lord Blunkett, former Labour Home Secretary under Tony Blair, coming out saying, we're going to have to look at temporarily suspending particular elements of the ECHR until we can get a grip. The Germans have done it, but only for 3 months. We may have to do it for 6 months in order to get a grip to ensure the appeals process is not abused. This would be suspending under Article 15 of the ECHR. Governments can derogate from some obligations during a, quote, public emergency. And then I think Stephen Yem, his name is, or Steve Yem, the Labour MP in Mansfield, who came out and said we need a Rwanda-style scheme. I mean, the Overton window has certainly shifted, and Nigel Farage is clearly living rent-free in Labour Party heads.
I think people are responding to the situation. I think Labour MPs with small majorities, like in Mansfield and elsewhere, have gone, I need to say something on this. My concern, and I'm open to the argument in a way over the ECHR, is that during Brexit, it was sold to us as a bit of a silver bullet to quell immigration. Well, as we've just discussed, our borders seemingly are more out of order, broken than ever before.
That's a political failure rather than a failure of Brexit. Brexit's a beautiful thing, a big, beautiful thing.
Maybe so. And this is why I have concerns. I look at who is on each side of the argument. And I'm very open-minded, as I hope you would agree, and I will listen 100%. To all sides. But when I see people like Robert Jenrick, it seems, and Suella Braverman as well, it seems to me as we're being sold a silver bullet again. If we leave the ECHR, it'll solve everything, and I don't think it will, because there are different levels of legislation, both in this country and European, that will stop people potentially being deported and otherwise. I saw over the weekend in the Sunday Times or the Saturday Times, Nigel Farage's sort of bold idea that there'll be 5 deportation planes a day and all the rest of it. I think he's going to face the same issues. And that's not to put off people trying and having ideas and being radical. We need radical things at this point. I am of the belief, and have been for many months now pulling my hair out, that if Keir Starmer wished to show leadership on this, he would call an extraordinary summit of EU leaders and the G7. Because even in this instance, we're seeing Japan, first time in 80 years to not have a Liberal Democrat Prime Minister, voting for a guy who was a security guard who's voting on Japan first. And we've seen it even as far away as there. And in the point of just to go back to your point of, you would hope that you would go to the next safe country. We've seen in Pakistan, they're deporting 50,000 people back to Afghanistan. People don't want people, which is awful in the case of people in Afghanistan and the fact that the Taliban are running riot. Mostly, I would say, because of us, but more so America and the way we pulled out and failed those people, to be honest. But you should call an extraordinary summit, and we look at the 45 Convention, we look at the fact that we see I wouldn't call it far right, but certainly right-wing anti-immigration parties doing well all across Europe. Every leader in Europe has something to say and going, we maybe need to solve this together, or we're all going to feel at least the political backlash, if not the societal one.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think? Matthew Talbot there suggesting let's have an extraordinary summit. Let's get some cross-working, cross-borders, in order to make sure that we can regain control of the borders of every sovereign nation and have a long-term solution to the migration crisis that is plaguing the world. Guess what? You can call in and tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000. That number will also let you WhatsApp us and voice notes. I love a voice note, so get them in. You can also text the word talk to 87222, and you can follow our messages on X at talkTV. After break, is it time to start slapping fines on those pesky people that blare music or blare their TV programmes from their phone when you're on the bus or the train? We'll find out next.
Nigel's going to end the little boats crossings in 2 weeks. I have about as much faith in him doing that as we all have in Donald Trump having attained peace in 24 hours, which he hasn't done. It reminds me of the guy down the pub who says, I know what to do, we'll take £10 billion and we'll send them all back to where they came from. It's not that simple.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hey up everybody, Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Ian Collins here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk, and I'm still delighted to be joined by Mr. Matthew Talbot in the studio with me, former Labour advisor. We've had one message in. The left always tell you why things can't be done. Zero initiative or bold thinking. Another one. Yet again, pure deflection from your, quote, favourite lefty. He even mentioned Andrew Tate. Unbelievable. And another one here as well coming in. Good afternoon, guys. Let's be honest. Starmer and Labour dislike the patriotic British people who will never vote Labour, and he's made it clear that any migrant, legal or not, is better than a British patriot and who he describes as far right racist. Well, tense text coming in for Sir Keir Starmer, backing up, I suspect, what this incredible YouGov poll is showing. But look, let's do something that not many people do. Let's go and talk about the Conservative Party, because they have decided to, and I'm going to say this honestly, copy and paste the Liberal Democrats, who announced a similar policy in April 2025. But the Conservative Party today now coming out and saying they will change the law so people can't blast music out loud on buses and tighten enforcement on trains, including on-the-spot fines and a legal duty on operators to enforce the rules. They plan to table amendments to the Railways Bill and the Buses Bill. Ministers argue from the Labour government that currently railway bylaws already ban music played to the annoyance of others, but enforcement is patchy and doesn't clearly cover buses. The plan would standardise and toughen it. Richard Holden, the Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, has said, and I quote, "Taking public transport shouldn't mean having to endure somebody else's choice of crap music." Matthew, the Conservatives on this might actually have tapped in finally to something, because this is your kind of basic retail politics where people will have stories of themselves being impacted by such a thing. It's just a shame it took the Liberal Democrats to get there ahead of them.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I did wonder. I thought, how is it slightly different? People would agree. And I'm more interested in the societal shift, because we used to have this problem when I was a teenager, 13, 14. You'd have people blaring music on the phone, back of the bus, growing up in Stockport. And then it went away, I felt. And I don't know if people sort of wearing earphones became
I reckon
like
maybe when AirPods came in, people could have wireless headphones and that was fashionable.
Yeah, possibly. And then the last few years, it's happened more and more. It used to be the odd person, I'd find, especially on buses, because I think the tube is a bit too loud to hear, particularly in London. And it's more and more. And I just think, you're just thick. You've got no manners, and whether we've had a bit of a slide back on, I don't know if it's parenting or otherwise. But no, I think this is the small stuff that builds up to make people annoyed at a society, and there'll be lots of little small things that I think we should probably be doing better. The problem with it is, like lots of things, is where's the staff? If this is already a bit of a railway bylaw and it's not being policed, well, you need to be policing it better, surely. So therefore, what's the encouragement to get more people to sign up to be sort of whether it be a train conductor, a train transport enforcement officer or whatever, which is really normally quite low paid, and you just get a load of grief every day. You've got to try, how do you get people over the line?
Well, I think you're right, because my frustration here is that the Conservative Party is talking about changing the law, and I think the problem with Parliament is everyone's convinced themselves, whether that be Labour and Conservative, and now even Liberal Democrats and Reform, who are looking at government, it's about introducing new bills. If you lay a new bill, because you get to put the title of a bill down, you get to have lots of little clauses, but essentially all you're doing is tweaking and playing with existing legislation, or in some cases copying and pasting it, but just in a different piece of legislation. And the problem therefore is it makes it easy for judicial reviews, where people can challenge certain things. It creates confusion for the police, where they're trying to decide what laws are they enforcing. And it just continues to add to what I call the bloated bureaucracy. Wouldn't it be better, as you say, for the Conservatives to come out and say, we know this is an issue, we know these rules exist, and we would invest in X staff to be able to issue fines, or have body cameras so that if people are abusive or don't accept the fine, we've got them on camera, we can then follow up with certain information, or just something different. I just think creating laws is now like the solution to everything. I actually think we've got too many laws. It's time to slim down and look at where, for example, we've already got lots of copy and paste, and indeed where we've got lots of contradictory law.
I think it's the embodiment as to why Parliament doesn't really function properly. I mean, as a campaigner, I managed to change 3 different laws well before going into Parliament. I managed, not even one, because I'd left by the time the fire and rehire had been ended by this government. I think part of it is, it's all well and good people want their name on it, we're making a change, but as you'll know yourself, you could come up with the best solution ever that people could agree on, but the red team don't want to give the blue team a win, and vice versa. So nobody, unless you've got a majority, no one's voting for it. And I wonder whether politicians have ruined it for themselves when it comes to the fact that really we need more numbers potentially on trains or public transport, because we've had this with, we'll put 10,000 more police on the beat, we'll put 15,000, we'll get immigration down to the tens of thousands. And from when people look out of their window or go to work and get public transport, they'll go, nothing's changed. So you've not actually, and they don't believe that you've actually done anything that you've said you were going to do with regards to numbers. So I think the numbers game of what really probably is the solution has lost its magic a little bit. or it's sounding quite good, so they go, we'll change the law, we're going to punish people, and it sounds that little bit more tougher, especially when it comes to law and order.
Well, listeners, tell us what you think. Are you happy to hear that the Conservatives want to have a crackdown on crap music on the buses and on the trains? And let us know, what's your version of crap music? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk to 87222 and follow us and message on X at talkTV. I listen to grime. I'm a huge Skepta. Stormzy, although he's not very favourable towards the Conservatives, so that did put me off for a while. Boy Better Know, obviously with JME and others. So maybe I've just highlighted that I am the problem, albeit I don't blare my music on those railways.
The law is subjective, so I'm into your music. So if you blare it next to me, I might not be bothered, actually.
We'll be bobbing along.
Well, I'll pay you fine with you. We'll go 50-50. Yeah, so, you know, the law can be subjective in this instance.
Well, we'll see what goes on there. But look, I do want to get to another story, Matthew, as well, that's been dominating the pages at the weekend regarding Angela Rayner. She's come out defending, obviously, the fact that she's just bought around, I think it's £700,000 to £800,000 luxury pad, as it's described, in Hove on the seafront. Now, look, I think she's been described as 3 pads Rayner. I think that's desperately unfair. Number one, she does own a house in Ashton-under-Lyne, one that she's owned for a while, albeit people have questioned that she benefited from this, you know, sort of a scheme which made it cheaper to buy, and now has made, I think, double the money back on it in terms of property value already. Admiralty House is not something that is her property. Listeners, I'm going to be honest with you here. Okay, Admiralty House is a grace and favour pad given to high-level ministers in government. She is the Deputy Prime Minister, and whatever you think of her, she's entitled, in my opinion, to a property that the government would give to someone of that ranking, one for security reasons, and most importantly, for obviously her to be able to enact her duties. Potentially, God forbid, if something happened to the Prime Minister, she would be nearby. And I tell you something, any Tory MP, and I saw Richard Holden on the airwaves moaning about it, bemoaning her property portfolio empire, you offer that man Admiralty House, he'd not just bite your arm off, he'd bite your legs off too with it. And I'll be frank about it, I would accept it hand over fist as well if I was in such the gig. So I'm not going to attack her for that, because that's not actually her property. But I think the problem here, Matthew, is it does reek of hypocrisy for someone who has been so open against a second home ownership, particularly on those seaside resorts. I know she would particularly point towards Devon and Cornwall, but we know it's priced people out of the market there locally. It means another house sitting empty for a long period of time when we have a home ownership crisis. She needs herself to build 1.5 million homes, something that was rumoured that she's worried she won't hit as a target and almost considered resigning over. But obviously then you've got she said we should have a double council tax. Someone should pay 100% council tax premium on second homes. Now, actually, in Brighton Hove, they do apply this, and her team have come out and said she will comply, she will pay all of it. James Cleverly had previously asked, who's a Shadow Secretary of State for Housing, Community and Local Government, has said she needs to come up clear on whether she pays the council tax, and was accusing her of dodging questions. I don't accept that. Reform just simply said she's a hypocrite. Is this the problem for her? The hypocrisy is the issue?
Yeah, I think you have to be honest, you know, Labour or otherwise, that you're going to be open to that charge. I think she's within her rights, particularly, I know the Grace and Favour pad is there, but you'll remember that if you don't represent a London constituency, you are allowed a home within London within a certain rental amount, or whether you choose to buy or whatever else. She's chosen clearly to have it in Hove, which I remember people from your intake actually who went as far away as Twickenham to Surrey because they didn't want to be that close to Westminster because they want to get away from work sometimes. You know, listen, Hove's a desirable area and all the rest of it, but one of the reasons people can't get on the housing ladder is because a lot of people have bought up, many years ago in particular, but sort of bought up more than one house and are creaming off the top by renting them out. The problem for her here is I don't think she can win. If she'd have rented it out as an Airbnb, she'd be creaming off the top, and I wouldn't like that behaviour at all. But now she's also open to the charge of leaving it empty 6 months of the year because she's going to be primarily based in a constituency if she's not in London. I think we should be free-loving people. You want to aspire to buy several houses, that's up to you. But if you're the housing secretary and you're passing laws effectively punishing people like yourself...
Landlords getting a tougher deal with the Renters' Rights Bill, for example.
Who knows, you know, there could be the wider thing of she's preparing for life after Parliament. If you know, the polls are to be believed, I'd quite like a seaside house in Hove where I can retire away having lost my seat and no longer in government. But, you know, I think it's within the rules. She's not doing anything wrong, per se. But obviously, to some, it'll feel a little bit like do as I say, not do as I do. And you've got to be open about that.
Mr. Matthew Talbot, Labour advisor, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. And let us know what you think. Is Angela Rayner a stark raving hypocrite, or do you think fair play? You've earned the money. You choose how you want to go about and spend it. 0344 499 1000. That's how you can WhatsApp us, call us, and voice note us. You can also text into 87222 the word talk at the starting message, and message us and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, we're going to be joined by former Home Office Special Advisor James Starkey, who's going to be talking to us about Sir Keir Starmer and his migration success or failure. Let's hear what James has to say after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
In Great Britain, Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Ian Collins here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. Adam, my amazing producer, has told me that me sharing my taste in music has meant that everyone's calling in saying I have a crap taste in music. So we want to find out from you, what's the worst thing you've overheard on someone blasting their phone whilst on a bus or a train? 0344 499 1000. That's how you call us, that's how you WhatsApp us, and that's how you voice note us. Please do send those in. You can also text into 87222 with the word talk at the starting message, as well as follow our messages on X at talkTV. We go to our next guest. His name is Mr. James Starkey. He is a former special advisor in the Home Office, and he's here to talk about Sir Keir Starmer and what the polls are showing is his failure to deliver on illegal migration. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Jonathan.
No, thank you for coming on, James. Would you describe my choice of music as crap? I just described it earlier. Would you say it's crap choice of music? Are you got a better connoisseur when it comes to what tunes should be blaring?
Well, I think I've known for some time that you have a terrible taste in music. So I'm glad that the Talk viewers are now in on that secret.
It's no secret indeed now, is it? I'm going to regret probably saying that, but hey-ho. Now, James, look, the YouGov polling done for the Times shows 71% of voters think Keir Starmer is handling asylum hotel issue badly, and that's including 56% of Labour voters. YouGov astonishingly is saying that asylum and immigration is now the top issue with the public at 37%, the economy at 25%, and NHS at only 7%. This is obviously on the backdrop of 111,000 asylum applications in the first year of Labour, up 14%. Hotel use up 8% under this Labour government too. I mean, is there an opportunity here for Labour to turn this around, do you think? Do you think they're doing the right things? Or do you think this is simply an issue that we keep reading in the briefings of getting the communications poor?
No, I don't think it's a communication thing. I think that's why I've got a lot of sympathy with the current incumbents of the Home Office, because, you know, when I was there, we had the same thing, which is often the criticism is it's a communication issue. The interesting thing is Yvette Cooper's kind of taken a slightly different tact from Conservative Home Secretaries who were kind of much more bullish in the language, perhaps more out there on the media. I think Yvette has taken what you might call a submarine approach. She's stayed quite below the radar. But what this demonstrates is the numbers catch up with you either way. And in terms of, small boats specifically, which is what the focus is here, I think, it doesn't matter what your comms approach is. If those numbers keep going up, you're going to have problems. And that's where Labour are now.
You said before on here that for Labour, obviously, they bet the house on growth, so the economic growth is important for them. Do you think that Smash the Gangs is also now an albatross hanging around the neck of Sir Keir Starmer? It almost has now become another version of Stop the Boats.
Yes, I think to some degree there's a connection. So I think they bet the house on growth. They can't really do anything else, including the other kind of main metric, if you like, they push, which is the NHS, unless they deliver on growth. I think it's a similar problem for the Conservatives. So what you had at the end, Rwanda became totemic, the flights to Rwanda, you'll remember better than anyone, Jonathan. Now, I remember discussing it with people, and you would discuss in kind of Westminster, and I'm sure on shows like this, whether or not that was a good thing to do, the kind of morality of the policy. But I think for the public at large, it became almost a question of ability to deliver. Does government work? And I think that's what you're seeing with the asylum issue, with the kind of small boats issue now, which is it's almost as much about, can politicians deliver on their promises? Keir Starmer promised to smash the gangs. Before him, Rishi Sunak promised to, quote unquote, stop the boats, was seen not to do it. But it kind of moved into, does government even work? Are you able to do the things you say you are? And I think if you speak to people around government, this Labour government now, they're having some of the frustrations that the Conservative government did on a range of issues, which they can't get the machinery of state to work. And I'm sure you'll get people will have their own views, listeners and viewers, as to whether they think the government's, fit for purpose, if you like. And I think that's one of the reasons people turn to parties like Reform, because they're just looking for much more drastic solutions.
And I'm interested there, James, where you mentioned Reform, because obviously we've had some quite significant interventions. Steve Yem, a Labour MP in Mansfield, said it's time for a Rwanda-style deal to get rid of illegal migrants. We've seen Graham Stringer, Labour MP in Manchester, Greater Manchester, come out and say it's time to leave the ECHR. And then I think the most significant intervention, Lord Blunkett, former Labour Home Secretary under Tony Blair, coming out and saying it's time to completely derogate, use these Article 15 powers that are in part of the ECHR, which says in a, quote, public emergency, governments can derogate from this. And he thinks we should do for at least 6 months, as Germany has done in recent times. I mean, is this a problem for Labour in the sense of the ball is now on Reform's pitch? Or do you think that if Labour take the advice of people like Lord Blunkett, do what they need to do, they can actually remove Nigel Farage from the field of play altogether?
Yes, I think the question is whether you believe they're willing to take the kind of action that people like Lord Blunkett are talking about. So in simple, crude terms, I think the ball is still in the hands, if we're going to carry on with the metaphor, of the Labour Party. So if they can deal with small boats, then they will get a level of credit for that. They'll be able to demonstrate that the things they do worked. I think there's scepticism, and as you've alluded to, the scepticism even within the Labour Party, that policy as it currently stands is going to deliver that. I'm sure you would have a government voice on here saying it needs time and there's no simple solutions. We said the same thing. Do they believe that? It's clear that some people in the Labour Party don't, and they think that more action needs to be taken. I think on the question of ECHR specifically, I think you've got Rajiv Shah later, who will talk in more detail, I would imagine, about what you can do. You would need something to replace that in terms of the reform policy. I'm not sure Bill of Rights does personally, but I think they can deal with it. The question is, for people like me and you, when we talk about it, I think that's obvious. If they brought small boats, the numbers down, if they brought NHS waiting lists down, and if they increased growth, which would ultimately increase the money in people's pockets, because they'll be able to cut taxes, then I think, yes, the ball is in their court. That's fine. But the real question is, do you think they are going to? Does any of the evidence of the past year suggest that those things are likely to happen? Do the evidence of the last budget suggest they're likely to get growth? Do the evidence of the current small boats numbers suggest they're likely to bring them down in the long term? Open question. I leave people to
yes.
call in and text in and tell us what they think about that.
Well, I would say the stats show it's not going to look great. And then final one from me, James. Obviously, you mentioned there briefly Reform's plan, quite bold and eye-catching, albeit the detail, I think, is due out tomorrow. The Conservative Party had their deportation bill where they've said they would do things like carving out the ECHR. We have got this long expected trail into Conservative Party conference where we're expecting Kevin Badenoch to announce that the party's position will be to formally leave the ECHR. Will the Conservative Party still struggle because of credibility, having obviously allowed the system to go haywire under them, or will this be a welcome step in the right direction when it comes to the Conservatives adopting leaving the ECHR? And actually, is it an opportunity for Conservative and Reform to unite around a shared idea of what they would do in government in order to unite the right?
I don't think you'll see them uniting anytime soon. I mean, let's look at one thing. If you were Nigel Farage now, and you were, what is he tracking averagely? 8 to 10 points ahead of the Conservatives. You look like you're the coming king. You know, you've got the devolved elections, which we're going to have a big set of elections next year, including in Scotland and Wales, but large swathes of councils across the country. Reform look like to do well, and then I don't see why you would cut a deal. You know, he's kind of the leader of a successful company, and the Conservatives are currently struggling, not quite yet in bankruptcy. You're not going to sell yourself to them. You're going to think you're going to be able to take them over at some point, I imagine, is the attitude in Reform. In terms of where Kemi is, I have some sympathy. I think if you look at the makeup of the parliamentary party after the election, it was what you might call, Jonathan, a bit wet, a bit One Nation-y, and I'm not sure you could immediately take that group of people to what was Robert Jenrick's position in the leadership contest last summer, for those people that can remember, which was to leave the ECHR. I think things have shifted. I think not least because there are many Conservative MPs, whether they be wet or otherwise, who are looking over their shoulder at Reform nipping at their heels. And they've got the concern of the Liberal Democrats, which a policy like this could lose voters to. But for some of them, the concern of Reform coming after them is bigger, and so they're now more willing to. But the question for Kemi and the Conservatives is, can they cut through? Because on a day like this, when it's about small boats, we end up talking about Keir Starmer and the government and what the Reform proposals are. And as we've just demonstrated, the discussion of the Conservatives normally comes a distant last.
Well, thank you so much there, Mr. James Starkey, former Home Office Special Advisor. We go quickly to our next guest. He is a former Special Advisor in the Ministry of Justice as well as in Number 10. His name is Mr. Rajiv Shah. He is a legal expert brain, big brain I'm going to call him, who I'm delighted to have join the show. Hello, Rajiv, how are you?
Hi, Jonathan. Good to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rajiv, because actually you were tweeting only last summer in that leadership contest that James Starkey was talking about earlier, when Robert Jenrick kind of alluded to leaving the ECHR and introducing a British Bill of Rights. Now, that is a significant thing that's been trailed in today's paper by Reform UK ahead of their detailed policy announcement tomorrow, which we see a very big eye-catching thing, which is scrap the Human Rights Act, leave the ECHR, derogate from the UN Convention for Refugees, and then introduce a British Bill of Rights. Now, I'll be honest, Rajiv, it's kind of a Conservative policy for a period of time that was floating around, and people like me were like, this is the solution to the problem. And then the reason I wanted listeners to have you on is because I heard people like you and from former Secretaries of State like Robert Buckland who warned me of the pitfalls of a British Bill of Rights. I was keen to get your view so listeners can understand why a British Bill of Rights might sound nice on paper but comes with many headaches.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, if you want to leave the ECHR, let's take a step back and ask why do you want to do that? What do you want to achieve? What's the problem with the ECHR? And there's many problems relating to immigration, as has already been discussed. But taking a step back, the big problem is that it takes these human rights, freedom from torture, right to fair trial, free speech, freedom of protest, that are all great. We all love those. But it basically means that it's judges who decide what these means rather than elected politicians. So, you know, if you take a current topical debate that's on immigration, how to balance freedom of protest with the right of the public to go about their business. And you and I and other of your listeners may have different views about how to strike the balance, but ultimately it's a question of political morality, how we do that, not a legal question. And the problem is that having the ECHR and a Bill of Rights would have the same issue, turns this question of politics into a question of law. So you still have the same issue of you're taking power away from politicians and giving it to judges. Now, if you go through all of the trouble of restoring the primacy of politics by leaving the ECHR, that's great, but then you completely undermine all of that good work by creating a British Bill of Rights. So you have to sort of ask the question, well, what's the point of it all?
So the danger here then, Rajiv, is, like you say, whilst we might get rid of those pesky judges in Strasbourg, as I would describe them, who interfere in what is UK sovereign law and our borders policy, for example, all we're going to do is further empower maybe courts like the Supreme Court or even the High Court judges. And in some cases, we've seen Robert Jenrick be very punchy regarding he thinks there's a lot of activist judges in the system. Reports in The Sun on Sunday as well of some judges who have historically worked for asylum sort of agencies to help people, being able to prevent them from being deported, now making decisions not to deport Jamaican rapists, for example. The idea is that actually this British Bill of Rights will allow UK judges, as you say, to basically just take on the same role as the judges we've seen in Strasbourg.
That's right. And, you know, I don't want to sort of cast aspersions on our judges or suggest they're not acting in good faith. But the point is, if you pass a law that tells them you decide those questions, you can't then blame them for deciding them in a way that you don't like. And so, you know, attacking the judges, in a sense, is a bit shooting the messenger. The problem is we shouldn't be giving them those powers in the first place.
And then final one from me, Rajiv, is the danger as well that we get into the definition of what is a right. So, for example, some people might say, you could see Labour politicians saying it's right to own a home, for example, could become something that's added with a supermajority like Sir Keir Starmer's got. He could easily add something like that into a British Bill of Rights, would then throw the whole housing system into chaos, because defining then, as you say, judges allowing to being able to, what is the definition of ownership of a home? Is it a single home? Is it multiple homes? Does that mean anyone who's homeless should automatically just be given a property? I'm assuming that's the other pitfalls too.
Exactly. The thing about ECHR is, you know, it was drafted by British conservative Europeans. It was intended to protect essentially quote-unquote right-wing freedoms against socialism. And it hasn't worked out that way at all. So you've got to imagine if in the 1950s, a bunch of conservatives drafted a conservative document and it's ended up being progressive, do we really think that in 2029 we'll be able to draft something better that will stay conservative and stand the test of time? And I'm a bit skeptical of that.
And Rajiv, sorry, just final one for me. So if you did, let's say Nigel Farage did indeed go ahead, leave the ECHR if he were in government, and he scrapped the Human Rights Act, does something need to be put in place to replace that? Or can you just go back to saying, well, we had a common law legal system prior to the Human Rights Act, we could just basically return to those days?
I think you can, but there will be aspects of our laws that you may want to revisit. So I'll give you a controversial and non-controversial example. How to balance freedom of speech and privacy that is currently being done through the Human Rights Act. Parliament has not legislated for that. If you were to scrap it, you need Parliament to come in and legislate and say what is the balance between them. And a non-controversial one, under the Mental Health Act, you are able to detain people who have mental health conditions on quite drastic grounds. The Human Rights Act makes those more humane and more palatable. If you were to just repeal it without any form of replacement, then you need to change our mental health legislation, for example. So if you were to repeal it, there's loads of work to be done on changing our legal framework on lots of issues. But I don't think the answer to that is create another Bill of Rights.
Rajiv Shah, their former Special Advisor in the Ministry of Justice and Number 10. Thank you so much for joining us today. Well, fascinating discussion there. You've been texting, you've been calling, and we'll be getting those after the break.
Nigel's going to end the little boats crossings in 2 weeks. I have about as much faith in him doing that as we all have in Donald Trump having attained peace in 24 hours, which he hasn't done. It reminds me of the guy. It reminds me of the guy down the pub who says, "I know what to do. We'll take £10 billion and we'll send them all back to where they came from." It's not that simple.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the amazing Ian Collins here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. And you have been calling, you have been texting, and you've been voice noting. Let's get to the text straight away. Dave from Dorset. Starmer handling immigration. He hasn't touched it yet. I think that perfectly sums up the situation there. Talk, the whole migration asylum system is backlogged because of human rights lawyers. When we have a human rights lawyer in charge for the country and not a leader, what chance do we have? Another text in here. Hi, Jonathan, we can't even stop shoplifting. What makes you think we'll stop loud people on public transport with their music? That's regarding the Conservatives' announcement there. Another one here from Brian in Worthing. Afternoon, Jonathan. Every night before I go to bed, I make sure doors are locked and windows are secure, therefore preventing anyone with an intention to enter my property. Can you please explain to me why it's so different when it comes to our borders? We are an island and it should be easier for us to protect our borders than landlocked Europe. But no, it would appear that all our doors and windows are wide open. What an absolute joke this country has become. John in Bristol. We need to stop faffing around at the edges, tweaking this law or one in, one out. It's not enough to halt the immigration crisis. Suitable immigration super tents with adequate facilities in France and process genuine asylum applications. Make clear illegal entry will mean an application will be accepted. Make it clear illegal entry will mean no application will be accepted and there will be no appeals. Another text coming in from Mark in Norwich. Jonathan, you probably won't read this out because Andrew is your buddy. Yeah, I know these things, mate, because I watch all the time. Well, she's not a buddy. I think that would be unfair, but I do know her. And personally, I've always found her very, very pleasant. He says, at the time when people are being evicted from their homes, sometimes with children, so that illegal immigrants can move in, it is outrageous that she's buying our holiday home. That's Mark in Norwich. Well, Mark, let me be clear with you. I think it does smack of hypocrisy, and I condemn that hypocrisy, and I think it's why the left will always come unstuck, because they are a massive bunch of hypocrites. However, I also think if Angela Rayner wants to buy another property, just like if I wanted to and could afford to, or albeit she can, I can't, then she should be able to do so. But again, accept the charge of hypocrisy. So hopefully that clears that up for you there. And then another one here from Jim in Devon. Really noisy on a bus yesterday as a man and child with YouTube on really loud. I hate rap. A dear old lady I know who got fed up with rap music from neighbours. She fixed it by turning up songs by Des O'Connor on loud. Well, there you go. The fight back continues. And let's go to a voice note from Rob, who wants to tell us about his views on loud music.
Jonathan, seriously, with all the problems in the country with illegal immigration, the economy, housing, the NHS, strikes, farmers, energy, yeah, this Conservative stupid party think that people are going to be interested in a law that you can't play music on trains and buses. How out of touch, seriously, are your party? Mate, seriously, think about it. All these problems and them talking about bringing in a law on buses. It's absolutely pathetic.
Well, Rob, so you know, we've got Saqib Bhatti, Conservative MP, coming on at the top of the next hour, so I will put that charge to him. Is this just gimmicky stuff from the Conservatives? Is this what people really want to be hearing from? Or is it, what I suspect it is, an issue that blights many people, and people will be glad to see that someone is willing to take the issue seriously, albeit I totally accept it's not the burning issue of the day. And actually, Terry from Hornchurch backs you up here to know the latest Tory earth-shattering policy is to fine people playing loud music on a train. They can't even get these people to buy a ticket, let alone enforce antisocial loud music. Great show. Thank you so much. Well, before we go to our big break at the top of the hour, Mark in Lincolnshire is going to talk to me about migration. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hi there, Jonathan. Yeah, not so bad, mate. Yourself?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. What do you think? Is Sir Keir Starmer getting a pass or a fail from you?
100% fail. Is Matthew still with you there, Jonathan?
Sadly not, sorry. Sadly not.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I do admire him. You know, he's you know, I don't agree with the damn thing he says, but, you know, at least he sticks to his guns. I just think with the immigration, you know, people such as Matthew, so many things they don't factor. I often wonder whether they actually see the people that are on the boats. You know, have they actually seen pictures of the people that come off the boats, the people that are going into the hotels? They don't look like the brightest and best. And we know that they're not anyway, because quite frankly, if you're, for example, a doctor or an engineer or something in Afghanistan, you can get to the next safest country, show your documentation, your qualifications, and you probably get a visa. You could probably set the pick of where you want to go in Europe, to be quite frank. I think we're all pretty happy that that's the case. You know, so the people that are willing to travel all this distance, leaving women, daughters, sisters, mothers, all behind, that in itself shows a distinct lack of moral character as far as I'm concerned.
100%. 100%.
You know, and the other thing that nobody ever talks about with this issue is, did anybody stop from this government or the previous, you know, your government, ever bother to ask the immigrants that have already been here for 30, 40 years what they think? Because if you actually bothered to do that, you would find out the same thing that I find out when I ask them.
Yep.
And people like my old father-in-law, who's an Egyptian that had to flee Egypt. He's a Christian Egyptian who had to flee Egypt because he was outspoken about Iran, the regime in Iran. And he was involved in a paper over there that, you know, criticised him, that kind of thing. So he got asylum in this country back in the 80s. And, you know, he fully integrated, very grateful to be in the country, all the rest of it. But if you speak to people like that, the number one thing that I always find that they say is they cannot believe the people that they're allowing in to come in on essentially what they consider pretty much everybody on those small boats. They can't believe that successive governments keep doing this, because what they're seeing is the very people they fled their countries from are now being allowed in without any checks to just wander about and are starting to filter and ferment the same kind of radical garbage that they were doing in their own, you know, their original country, their country of origin. And nobody ever asked these people,
Mark,
you know, what they think.
Mark, you've hit the nail on the head. I have the same conversations with first, second and third generation migrants, and they totally agree. Those who've integrated into our country, have paid their taxes, worked hard, done all they can for their family and their country and their community, and they feel completely overlooked and ignored and actually undermined by the amount of mass illegal migration into this country right now. You know what to do. 0344 499 1000. That's how you call us, WhatsApp us and send us voice notes. You can also text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222, and you can follow us and message us on X at talkTV. At the top of the next hour, Saqib Bharti, Conservative MP and Shadow Minister of State for Education, is going to be joining us in the studio to talk to us about Sir Keir Starmer's migration plans. Does he think they're working, and the Conservatives, can they regain their credibility?
More and more people.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Great Britain. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Ian Collins here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. You've been texting, you've been calling, you've been voice noting, and we want them more. But coming up, the Prime Minister is under mounting pressure over small boats and asylum hotels, with a poll showing 71% of voters, including 56% of Labour supporters, disapprove after more protests at the weekend. Meanwhile, 140 people were arrested on the first day of Notting Hill Carnival for offences including assaults on the police, robbery and possession of weapons, up 40% on last year. And prisons could reach full capacity by next March unless ministers cut short sentences and release inmates sooner, Ministry of Justice forecasts warn. My two now questions for you, based on the reaction we're getting, is number one, is Keir Starmer handling migration badly? I think we all know the answer to that one. And secondly, what's the worst thing you've ever heard on a bus or a train when it comes to music? What's your version of crap music? Quoting the words of Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, Richard Holden. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined down the line by I think he's new to the show maybe, or certainly new with me anyway. His name is Mr Saqib Bharti. He is the Conservative MP for Meriden and Solihull East, and he is the Shadow Minister of State in the Department for Education. Hello, Saqib, how are you?
Hi, Jonathan. Good to be here.
Well, look, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, Saqib, the Conservatives coming out with a big announcement today regarding loud music on buses and railways. The Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, Richard Holden, has said that he wants to see people shouldn't have to endure someone else's choice of, and I quote, crap music. I shared what my version of music is. I'm keen to know, what's your version of, what's the music of choice for you, and what would you deem as crap music?
Oh, now you're really putting me on the spot, Jonathan. I'm trying to think. I have quite an eclectic taste in music. I'm trying to think. I'll come back to you on that one. Let me have a bit of a...
Okay, we'll have a think. We'll have a think. Is there any particular music you would hate to overhear on the bus or the train? Is there anything that would really grind your gears?
Do you know, I'm not really into drill music. So if that kind of stuff, probably if I heard it and it was really loud, I'm sure I'd feel quite strongly about it. But look, I was listening to your last contributor from the audience, from your listeners, and look, I think this actually speaks to he said it was a gimmick. It's not. This speaks to a broader sense of an insecurity that people feel around antisocial behaviour, and it doesn't just stop there. I'm sure we'll probably unpack some of this later on in the show, but there is a broader feeling around security, and I can give you personal examples. Being in Westminster during the week, I've walked out of Parliament, I've had someone reach over and take my phone out of my hands. Now, my wife had her phone stolen, and when we went down to the Vodafone shop to get the SIM card blocked, etc., the lady in front had her phone stolen, and the lady who was serving her said, "I've not sold any phones all day. I've had 40. I've done 40 of these. And if you extrapolate that across all the mobile phone providers just in central London, you can just imagine the cost of that." And so I take the view, actually, there is no such thing as real petty crime. This all feeds into other stuff, and it's about respecting each other. So if you're on the bus, you can't put headphones in, and you are going to play music at such loud volumes that it's disturbing everybody else. And I assume there'll be a bit of common sense applied to this. Clearly, there has to be something done about it, because people feel very strongly about this.
Well, I was about to say, actually, I agree with you. Look, I get that people will say immigration, the NHS, the state of the economy, those are the big issues. I don't think the Conservative Party denies that, but I think the Conservative Party is actually showing, for the first time I've seen, some decent, what I call retail politics, which is, as you say, there are plenty of us in our lives who have been on a bus or a train the last couple of years in particular, where there are young people in particular just blaring out music without any consideration for others around them, despite the fact there is an abundance of wireless headphones and earphones that could be now purchased from a variety of different providers. And so I think it's right to say, you know what, like you say, we're going to hark back to a time where you have respect for the people around you and respect for the community that you live in. And at the end of the day, I think, as you're saying here, the Conservatives are planning to put amendments to the Railways Bill and Buses Bill to say that basically there should be some enforcement made on buses and on the railways as well, with on-the-spot fines. And I think this is the type of thing that will actually help. I think this is the type of thing that's popular. My only question would be, the Liberal Democrats did propose this similar thing, albeit they would do a £1,000 fine, they specified, in April 2025. Is this a good chance for the maybe Conservative and Lib Dems to work together, to collaborate on when it comes to things that are in the nation's interest?
Look, we will always put forward as common sense policies, and especially when it comes to things like antisocial behaviour, security, even when we talk about immigration, actually, and we'll unpack some of what reform are talking about. We will put that together, and if people want to get behind our agenda, our door is open.
And you say there about immigration, obviously reform as well. If you don't mind, I'll go straight to that reform thing. Obviously, Nigel Farage put out a very punchy policy position. Obviously, immediate arrest and detention using ex-military bases, up to 24,000 spaces on those. Leave the ECHR, abolish the Human Rights Act, derogate from the UN Refugee Convention and UN Agreement Against Human Torture, introduce the British Bill of Rights, offer $2.5 grand for those who volunteer to deport themselves, as well as having the flight covered, fare covered too, and remove people back to countries even like Afghanistan and Eritrea, where Nigel Farage is willing to do deals with, or send them to safe third countries like Rwanda, or use the Ascension Islands. I mean, it is eye-catching, it is bold. Is it something that you support?
Look, Nigel Farage will come out with eye-catching policies. He is a populist politician. He will come out with policies that he thinks capture the mood of the day. But the reality is the Conservatives have had a plan for a deportation bill for many, many months now. A lot of what he's talking about is actually stuff we've already said that we will do. And my worry is actually that he will march people up a hill and he won't be able to deliver any of that. I mean, let's take the...
Oh, sorry, Saqib, the signal just cut up a bit there. We will get back to you, don't you worry, OK, because you were just in your stride. So Saqib making the point that a lot of this was already in the Conservative deportation bill. Just to be clear, the Conservative deportation bill, it says to carve out elements of the Human Rights Act is the idea there. So the idea is that rather than scrap the Human Rights Act, they would carve it out. And of course, we expect Kemi Badenoch to come out at Conservative Party conference and say that the party's position is to leave the ECHR entirely. So we'll be looking to hear those. Saqib, sorry, I know you're joining us. Apologies there for a bit of technical difficulty. Sorry, you were just in your stride. You were just in your stride. So you were saying there, Nigel Farage is a populist. He can push easy solutions. A lot of these solutions are already actually Conservative policies, and then I'll let you continue from there.
You know, thanks, Jonathan. I'm sorry about that. But is he going to sit down with the Taliban to do a deal? Is he going to recognise a Taliban government? What's he going to do when he does that in terms of the Afghan women and girls that are being treated badly? You know, it's not just a simple kind of one-issue solution to all this. It's much, much broader. So he'll do the eye-catching stuff. But the reality of delivering these policies is a completely different scenario. We've already said that we will deport foreign criminals. You know, we need, frankly, we need the prison spaces. But it is also the right thing to do. When people have come over here, abused any hospitality they've been given, and abused the British sense of fairness, they absolutely should be deported. But Nigel Farage, by the way, was against mass deportations a few months ago, and now all of a sudden he's changed. So I'm really curious as to what's changed in his mind from a few months ago when he said it was absolutely not the answer. And my worry is that he will say anything and everything to get himself over the line, but in the end there will be no delivery and people will be left very, very disenfranchised.
Now, Saqib, Nigel Farage will say that if you look at Germany, for example, they have been deporting migrants to Afghanistan and no one's accused them of being Taliban sympathisers. So why can't we do that in the UK?
Well, look, all good journalists should, and I count you as one of those, Jonathan, should ask him that question. Will he recognise the Taliban then? Will he do that? Will he sit down with them and will he do a deal? Will he be shaking hands with the sheikhs over there? You know, we've got huge amounts of illegal migration happening from Iran. Will he sit down with the Ayatollahs? We've got Somalia, Sudan, Eritrea. These things absolutely need to be dealt with, by the way. But how is he going to do that in a practical, sensible way? It's all well and good announcing things without a thought-through plan. That's the difference with the Conservatives. We are thinking through what we're going to do. What does it mean to leave the ECHR? And what will it mean in terms of, will that solve the issue? Do we need to leave the Refugee Convention? What about the Human Rights Act? Do we just derogate from that, as we've said already? Or do we have to go further? There are serious questions, and you can't take the British people for a ride. You have to take them seriously and have a proper thought-through plan. And I'm very confident that we will have that.
But you say, Saqib, there, like, for example, we expect Kemi Badenoch to announce at Conservative Party conference that the party's position will be formally to leave the ECHR. You say that with the deportation bill, I know there's carve-outs for the Human Rights Act, not to scrap it entirely, but carve out when it comes to immigration cases in order to deport illegal migrants and foreign national offenders. Albeit, Saqib, I'm going to say there are a lot of Conservatives in the parliamentary party, when people like myself put those down as amendments to the Safety of Rwanda Act under Rishi Sunak, that voted against that with Labour MPs. So you can imagine it's a bitter pill for me to swallow and trust that that would actually be delivered on. But let's take it at good value that it would do. You then talk about the Refugee Convention. Possibly, do we need to derogate or indeed leave that? There seems to be a cigarette paper here between Conservative and Reform, and rather than being at loggerheads with one another, why don't we come together, unite the right and have a joint plan, use our joint expertise and experiences in order to make sure the public know that everyone's working in their interest and to see the back of this Labour government?
Well, look, Jonathan, first of all, Labour, and just coming back to the government, they've completely lost control of their borders, and they have completely lost control of any kind of security around our nation. And so it is absolutely imperative that we come up with a credible plan around this. This is why our approach is the right approach. But look, you know, again, Nigel Farage has already practically copied, and you say cigarette paper, he's basically copied and pasted a lot of what we're working towards. We will have a credible, thought-out plan. And frankly, you know, if Nigel Farage wants to get behind us, then he's more than welcome to. We will be putting our plan and taking the fight to Labour and making sure that we have a credible plan to make sure that anyone who comes over to this country illegally is dealt with according to the law.
Now, Saqib, you obviously mentioned Labour there a number of times, and indeed that's the right thing to do because they are the current government. We've now seen in their first year in office, illegal asylum applications were 111,000, up 14%, despite people like yourself being told in the House of Commons chamber that hotels were being closed, albeit actually those were hotels closed under the last Conservative government to around 200, but actually hotel use has gone up by 8%, 32,000 people in hotels. We also see, obviously, Labour saying that they want to streamline quicker the appeals process, albeit 50% of appeals end up normally being granted, along with nearly two-thirds of first-time applicants being accepted too. You say Labour's lost control of the borders. I mean, do you think this is the albatross round Sir Keir Starmer's neck? Do you think this is what will define the next election and cost him the next election?
Jonathan, the key thing about Keir Starmer, and you'll remember this, from all the way back in 2019 when we both first entered Parliament together, Keir Starmer does not stand for anything. He does not believe in anything, right? Anything he says today will not stand tomorrow if it doesn't suit him. And that's that credibility issue is a massive gap for the Labour Party. Every time in the last Parliament where we put together amendments or legislation to stop illegal migration, the Labour Party were on the other side of that boat. The idea that they have now changed their position because of polling is for the birds. They have created this migration crisis. They've exacerbated it, and now they are adrift at sea. They have no idea what to do, and they're completely all over the place. They scrapped Rwanda pretty much on day one. They paused when it came to legal migration, they paused the salary thresholds that we had introduced. I was in that meeting when Kemi, Robert Jenrick, expressed their very strong views on this, and James Cleverly then went to the House of Commons and put that out there. Yvette Cooper, Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer, they were completely against this. Their voting record speak for themselves. Only the Conservatives can get this issue under control. Should we have done things better in the last Parliament? Kemi's been very honest about that. But we have learnt our lesson, and we will deliver for the people of Britain.
And Saqib, obviously, I know you've got a financial background in terms of financial services and stuff as well. We saw, quite shockingly, on the front of the Sunday Telegraph yesterday, that they fear that we are in the 1970s, potentially requiring an IMF bailout, as we last saw in 1976. And this wasn't just some scaremongering, some random think tank. These were three highly considered and thought of economists that have said, looking at the high tax, high spend and high borrowing agenda under this current Labour government, and with the cost of borrowing at record high levels that we haven't seen for a while, inflation nearly double the rate that it needed to be, and obviously unemployment also having ticked up under this Labour government. I'm just keen, obviously, with your economics background, to understand just how seriously should we take that threat? Do you think we are in a situation where we could see a 1976-style IMF bailout?
Jonathan, I believe we're in the 1970s already. I mean, Rachel Reeves, when she, back in January, I think I did an interview and I said she has got very, very bad options. She's got to appease the bond markets, which were already reaching record highs. And she also had to appease our backbenchers. Fast forward 7 or 8 months, your 20-year bond yield, where the government effectively goes to the bond markets to borrow money, are record highs since records began. Your 30-year bond yields are at record highs. Your 10-year bond yields are at record highs. It is going to be really, really costly for the government. Look, I hope we're not going to be going to the IMF. Of course I do, because reality is it is the poorest to get hit hardest. The IMF are going to turn around and say they want record levels of expenditure cutting. They want tax rises. And the difference in 1976 was that actually we borrowed a lot in foreign currency, and the US effectively, through the IMF, had bailed us out. And that, we're not in exactly the same situation. But of course, you have to take it seriously. And Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have no control over their own backbenchers, let alone the country's borders or the country's economy. And that's why when you've seen the welfare bill rebellion, actually, no wonder Rachel Reeves was crying the next day, because she's got very, very limited options now. And ultimately, they've attacked the wealthy, who pay huge amounts of tax and help fund our public services. They've attacked ambition. They've attacked businesses. The British Retail Consortium, by the way, has just in the last few days has said that food inflation is going to hit 6% by Christmas. 6% when we're all doing our Christmas shops. And people, I represent some very, very poor wards. I'm going to be thinking about the support that they need, and it is all because Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer thought they could take people for fools at the last election. They came in and they made this fictitious black hole, and they wanted to put this around everybody else's neck and make sure that this was a political win for them. And they've absolutely just absolutely ruined the bed. I was going to use stronger language, but they've gone. It's a really, really serious situation. And now it means that the markets do not take seriously Britain when we will go borrow money, and the bond yields will be increasing.
How seriously, Saki, would you accept the charge that the Conservatives were the ones who left Labour, as they would say, with a £22 billion black hole? They left with a tax burden at the highest levels since records began, that they left an economy creaking all over the place, underinvestment in public services, wage stagnation and growth stagnation. I mean, that would be the charge against the Conservatives. It's a fair charge, isn't it?
The reality was that when we were in government, and you'll hear constantly Conservative MPs say quite rightly that we left inflation at 2%, but it was much broader than that. By the way, I was a tech minister. We had the largest tech, the second largest tech economy in the world. We had record numbers of unicorns, and we were creating jobs. Since Labour have come in, we've had record numbers of business closures. We've had unemployment rising. Hospitality has been hit hard. Our farmers have been hit hardest. Our pensioners, some of our poorest pensioners have been hit hard. At the next election, people are going to say, and we will ask this question of the electorate: do you feel wealthier under a Labour government? Do you feel that they've been competent? Do you feel safer and secure under a Labour government? And I suspect the answer will be no. And the Conservatives will be putting a credible offering to make sure that we fix the issues and the challenges that Labour have left behind. They bankrupted us in 2010, and it looks like they are, they're going to have economic turmoil going forward.
Now, look, final question for you, Saki. I get quite a few texts on this type of view here on Talk, which is David, for example, in Swindon's text in, the Conservatives are irrelevant now. I'd love you to just use this opportunity to push back on that. How is the Conservative Party still relevant? Keir Starmer has deliberately deployed a tactic to make Nigel Farage the unofficial leader of the opposition. Nigel Farage has obviously grasped that opportunity with both hands. He's led every single poll since April that's been done in terms of national polling. He obviously had those big electoral victories in May, where the Conservatives obviously took a big kicking again. How are the Conservatives still relevant?
Look, we are, apart from being the official opposition, the reality is that we've got serious questions to answer as a country. How do you deal with issues around migration, but also the economy, as we've just discussed? And Keir Starmer's strategy of putting Nigel Farage front and centre, well, he's paying the price for that. And I wonder if Keir Starmer is still going to be leading the Labour Party into the next general election. That will be something for the Labour Party backbenchers to decide. Will Rachel Reeves still be the Chancellor of the Exchequer? I'll leave that out there. But Nigel Farage, who's been previously been a free market right-wing politician, has called for nationalisation, has called for scrapping of the two-child benefit cap. You know, he's now a protege to Michael Foot. And so there is only one party who is seriously talking about reducing tax burdens, that is seriously talking about making sure that individuals like your caller or your texters have the freedom to make something of their life, you know, whether it's starting a business, whether it's getting the best education and having a credible offering, which is what we will be putting to people. And I actually think the British electorate are really sensible. So there's a lot of mileages in this game yet, Jonathan. It's definitely not over.
Saki Bharti, Conservative MP for Meriden and Solihull East, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today with those views. And listeners, tell us what you think. I thought that was the first Conservative MP I've heard for a while on the airwaves, throwing some punches in Reform UK's direction. Do you buy it? Do you think the Conservative Party can win back your trust? Are you worried about whether reform sums add up and whether the big policy announcements they're making can actually be delivered? Well, you can tell us that by calling in 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp and voice note us too on that number, or text 87222 with the word talk and starting message, and messages on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Great Britain. This is Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Ian Collins here on the home of Common Sense, that is Talk. And as I say, you're texting, you're calling, you're voice noting, and blind, the texts are coming through. We've just had Saki Bharti, Conservative MP there for Meriden and Solihull East. Blimey, he didn't hold back on what he thought about Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Said that Nigel Farage was now a protege to Michael Foot. Love to get what Reform UK's response to that would be. But Barry's texting, this is just a Tory gimmick referring to the Conservatives saying that they would introduce fines on those who play, quote, crap music out loud on buses and trains. Who is going to enforce it? It's not a vote winner from an extinct party who are complicit in the mess we are in. Another one here is from Stuart in Derby saying, these Tories can't stop lying. Nigel hasn't copied anything. The Tories are stealing reforms plans. So again, another strong response there. David texts in, why do you not ask these Tories why are they below the Labour Party in the polls when this Labour Party has been so awful for the country? Ian's texting, if Reform and Conservatives made a coalition, then Reform would almost certainly lose my vote. No holding back there. And then coming to the announcement regarding music, Jonathan, Crap music on transport, play loud grunge music through intercom systems to drown them out. That's Colin from Gwent for texting in. Thank you very much there. Oh, another one here from Anna in Surrey. Blah, blah, blah. The Tories sat there for 14 years scratching their backsides. Mass immigration is totally their fault. Another one here. Jonathan, I've been a Conservative voter 45 years. Can you please tell your guest, and that was Saki Bharti, Conservative MP, that whenever I now hear Conservative politicians speak, my mind just switches off. They are as guilty as Labour of flooding this country with migrants, so why should I suddenly trust them to do the right thing now? They are history. They appeal to virtually nobody. Well, strong words there. But let's also now have some takes on Labour. Kevin has voice noted in. He is on Labour. Let's hear what he's got to say.
Jonathan, we have a Prime Minister who supports migration. The boats will not stop. We have a Chancellor who can't count to 10. We have a Deputy Prime Minister who's enjoying capitalism now. The front bench of the government haven't got business experience, none whatsoever. Starmer is scared of his backbenchers. That's why the benefit bill will never be cut. What a mess.
I'll tell you what, Kevin, if any political party that is opposing Labour is looking for their next political TV ad, I suggest they just play that voice note. They may not want my mugshot on the screen. I'm not as pretty, maybe, as they'd want me to be. But I tell you what, your words perfectly, I think, sum up the hypocrisy, the out-of-touchness, the inability of this Labour government. So very well done indeed for that. Let's take a caller, Ian in Bedfordshire, with his views on Sir Keir Starmer and immigration. Hello, Ian.
Hello there. Nice to meet you.
Nice to chat to you too. Now, tell us what you think. Keir Starmer, is he doing a good job?
Well, I think when people approach it from the wrong sort of direction when they say, is Keir Starmer doing a good job on immigration or not? He's doing a fine job on immigration. Absolutely brilliant for what he wants. He doesn't want to stop immigration.
Well done.
So he's doing a brilliant job for what he actually wanted to do. It was obvious from the start when they come out with Smash the Gangs, and every Labour MP went round all the media before the election trouting out, we're going to smash the gangs.
They don't use that word as much, do they? We don't hear them say that as much nowadays.
Well, odd that, isn't it?
I know, I wonder why.
It was just a con. There was never anything behind it. It was never meant to do anything.
Do you know?
Just when people said, what are you going to do about it if you get rid of Rwanda? Oh, we're going to smash the gangs.
Do you know what, Ian? I think he totally exposed himself. Just to back you up, I think Sir Keir Starmer totally threw himself under the bus with that now ridiculous interview where he shared that he didn't properly read the speech, which was meant to be a reset moment to rebuild credibility with the voters and take on Nigel Farage, and admitted that the Island of Strangers comment, which actually I think the overwhelming majority of this country actually agreed with him on, was words that he regretted using. And then when he got a bit of backlash, obviously for the fact that he'd U-turned already, he then performed another U-turn and said, oh no, I meant what I said, just I wouldn't have used those precise words. I mean, that exposed the hypocrisy of Sir Keir Starmer, didn't it?
It does. You can't trust the man as far as you could throw him. I mean, he comes out with all these different things and, oh, well, we've taken them out of the hotels. We're going to get them all out of the hotels. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to rubber stamp it and say, we'll give them all citizenship and they'll all be living next door to you in a nice council house because we've allowed them their sort of application as a
hit the nail on the head, Ian. It's going to be an amnesty. You know, it's going to be an amnesty.
Yeah, there'll be an amnesty. And then next year, when another 100,000 come over, they'll be in the same point again, and they'll give them amnesty, and it'll just go on and on and on, and it'll just get worse and worse, and it will increase. The only way to do it, stop it, turn the boats around.
Ian from Bedfordshire, thank you so much for your call. We've had more texts coming in here. Jonathan, I can see a budget that surprises everyone with its softness in October and a speedy election called whilst its warm glow persists. It would take their gaslighting to the next level, but totally keeping with their ethos to date. That's Mark in Norfolk there. Another one here from Stephen Wells. I wonder if Circa will put a cheeky bid in for Big Angie's new pad. Could be a hefty profit in that. So that's really caught me out there. So Stephen Wells, that is very funny. Thank you very much. Is that Tony at Bournemouth, rap is crap, long live rock. Well, Tony, obviously you don't like my music choice. Ian, I'm sorry, but if someone's playing music that you don't like on public transport is your biggest problem in life, then I think you're doing well. I thought that's interesting. Is Ian being a little bit flippant there? Do you think actually it is something that people should take more seriously. And then Joe from Norfolk, great show, Jonathan. I really wish Labour and the Conservatives spent more time and energy and airtime opportunities to show how they can improve lives for people than just slagging off Farage and Reform. We all know the more they slag Farage off, the more worried they are of them. Joe from Norfolk, well, you've been texting, you've been calling, and this is how you do it. 0344 499 1000. That's how you can call, that's how you can WhatsApp, and you can voice note. Text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222, or follow a message on X at talkTV. After the break, one of our favourites here on Talk, Gareth Wynne-Jones, farmer, is going to be joining us to tell us about the amazing poll that's been conducted that shows that 0% of farmers would vote Labour in a future general election. We'll see you after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Great Britain. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Ian Collins here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. We have had a hell of a show with a hell of a load of guests and a hell of a load of texts, calls and voice notes too. And this is how you do it. 0344 499 1000. That's the WhatsApp call, WhatsApp number for voice notes too, and the call number. Or you can choose to text 87222, the word talk at the starting message, or follow us and message on X at talkTV. Well, we go to another story now, and this time we're going to be speaking to a favourite of mine, and I know a favourite of many of you here on Talk. His name is Gareth Wynne-Jones. He's joining me down the line. I'm hoping for some beautiful Welsh countryside. Hello, Gareth, how are you?
Hello there, how are you?
I'm good. Sun's out, guns out, from what I can see for those who are not on the listening on the radio. What's the temperature where you are today?
Hot, scorch you.
And out of interest, Gareth, obviously I saw Jeremy Clarkson tweeted not long ago that this has been a terrible harvest again for farmers. I was just keen to quickly get a view from you. I hadn't spoken to any since, sorry, I saw that message. What's been the troublesome with this harvest? People are obviously enjoying the sun, but I'm assuming the sun comes at a cost when it comes to growing crop.
Yeah, well, we don't grow a lot of crops here, not on these mountains, but yeah. Dry weather like this will decrease the amount of grass that's grown, so it's a bit of a struggle. A lot of farmers, livestock farmers, that are dependent on that grass to feed their animals, and some of these farmers already, are feeding their winter fodder in the summer, which again is an extra cost. Yeah, the grain boys have really struggled this year. It's been an absolutely disastrous year for them. Straw crops are down, grains down, they're not going to make a lot of money. And then we've got numpties in government that have got no idea that they are sleepwalking into food shortages and less farmers on the ground, less land to produce food, less food security. Yeah, no wonder they've got zero farmers going to vote for them.
Well, I was about to say, for listeners, this is an extraordinary poll. It's by the Country Land and Business Association. 490 farmers were surveyed. of which around 80% fear their businesses won't survive the next decade. That is a very worrying thing indeed. The question was, I'm worried that my business will not survive the next 10 years. 40% strongly agree, 38% agree. I mean, quite incredible. Then when asked, well, how would you vote? 38% said Conservative, 36% said Reform UK. Lib Dems are just under 4%, undecided on 21%, Labour on 0%. I mean, Gareth, I'm assuming you could have told me this without even needing this poll needing to happen, right?
Yeah, we probably could, but yeah, give these boys another 12 months, give Mr. Starmer another 12 months, and I think you'll get that from the majority of the general public in the United Kingdom. It's a mess, isn't it? You know, this is not just hitting farmers. Every single business has been hit. It's very, very difficult times at the moment, you know, and money's been spent on things that they shouldn't be. So I think we need change, and I think the country gave them an opportunity to come in and make a difference. You know, they were voted in quite a few rural areas as well, and yeah, they've done nothing but really deceive us and give us a harder time than what we were under the Conservatives. So, you know, it looks like there's going to be a massive reshake on, in the United Kingdom with government in the next election. But before then, don't forget, we've got a massive election here in Wales in May of next year. So, yeah, it's heating up, pardon the pun, already here. We are, there's some serious people pushing some great agendas out there. But look, we need people to deliver. We've had 26 years of government in Wales from Labour, and it's been an absolute disaster. And the last few years has been even worse. So we need change, but we need somebody to come in with a manifesto that they keep to. We've had a bellyful of lies and misleading information. We need people that are going to say what they put down on that piece of paper, and I think honesty has to be the first policy for every government. And back, you know, the British agricultural sector, tourism, you know, what we got left in this country is tiny, and we need to protect it. And especially when these people are feeding the nation every single day, and we're getting nothing but, you know, grief, red tape, problems, and the government is the main driver behind that.
Well, just to back you up, Gareth, respondents to the survey blame Labour's inheritance tax reforms, obviously the U-turn from the promise that they made ahead of the election they would not introduce the family farm tax, when the plan has already led to investment being paused across the sector. Over 3 in 10 have seriously considered selling up and leaving within 5 years. Many expect they'll sell land or take on debt just to keep afloat. We know there's about 3,000 fewer agricultural businesses since Labour's come into power. That's including farms and other forms of agricultural business too. Because as you say, Gareth, it's not just the farmer, it's the tractor seller. I think tractor sales have plummeted in recent months. We obviously also know those other businesses that supply chain, as it were, into the farming industry are all just being absolutely butchered by what Labour's done. I mean, we've got here the president for the Country Land and Business Association saying our polling shows that Labour's inheritance tax reforms will force hard choices on farms that have sustained communities for generations, selling land, laying off staff and shelving plans for the future.
And the scary bit is, land is sold, there's not going to be farmers buying that land. It'll be built big multinational corporations, you know, and that's what is being driven by the globalists. And this net zero agenda is killing this country and many other countries as well. We've got to wake up and smell the coffee, and I believe food security should be at the top of every single government's policy in the world. Doesn't matter where you are, you know, protect the people that are feeding you. Do not bite the hand that feeds you. And we're seeing the businesses surrounded by us now, from, like you say, the dealerships and so many other businesses that rely on that farmer folding. And it's because farmers are so worried about spending money that they would have been spending before, reinvesting into the farm, you know, in machinery and innovation, in security, in whatever way they can. And that's why farmers are pulling back. That's why they're tightening their belts. They're not spending because they're worried that they're going to need that money you know, to pay off this inheritance tax. And let's never forget one thing. Food has been kept really, really affordable by the farming communities. You know, OK, it's been subsidised, but they have to understand that we're not producing any more land in this country. You know, there's more land going to solars, there's more land going into development. So this island is getting smaller, the population is getting bigger. You know, there's global problems with producing food worldwide. And I just don't get it that they don't understand the importance of the farmer on the land producing this food to feed the nation affordably, seasonally, sustainably and healthily. And that needs to be pushed across into 10 and 11 Downing Street ASAP before it's too late. We can't afford to lose any more people on the ground. You know, my family's been on this farm for 375 years. I love what I do, and I spent most of my life working the land, and I don't want it to change, and I want the next generation to have the same opportunity to feed people as I have. You know, it's a wonderful way of life. We're never going to be multi-millionaires, but, you know, we're here to do a job, and hopefully the majority of the general public are really supportive, and they want to stop this inheritance tax. And to be honest with you, I think everybody in the UK shouldn't be paying inheritance tax on anything, because at the end of the day they've paid that tax to buy that land, to buy them businesses. They should be able to pass it down to the next generation as well without being taxed. We're taxed on bloody everything. It's unbelievable how much tax is wasted in this country on things that shouldn't be spent on. You know, I don't mind my money going into the NHS and into other places, but look, just start to shake up this country and start to make things right for the working class and for the people that are feeding it.
Gareth, I've had a text in here from Paul in Milton Keynes. He said, why did over 50% of farmers vote for Labour in the last general election? He's just keen to get your view. Why were farmers so willing at the last election to back Labour?
I would probably disagree that 50% of farmers voted for Labour, to be honest with you. I'd love to know where he got them stats for. Yeah, I'm one farmer that has never voted for Labour. I voted for every other, but I've never voted for Labour, and I don't think I ever will, especially now. It's not a party for the countryside. It's not a party for the farmers, and it had that opportunity when it went in. And you know, the sad reality, Keir Starmer said he was going to protect family farms in the NFU conference pre-election. The first budget comes in, and we know what happened. You know, they're going back on their promises. They're going back on their manifestos. They're not people we can trust going forward, in my opinion, and we need change.
Well, look, Gareth Wyn-Jones there, farmer in Wales. Thank you so much for joining us. A great friend of ours here on Talk, outlining that incredible survey by the Country Land and Business Association that said 0% of those surveys would vote for Labour. Interestingly, Conservatives on 38, Reform on 36. And as Gareth said, big elections in Wales next year for the Welsh Parliament. Big elections also because Reform UK are currently leading in many polls. The Conservatives will be looking to try and cling on as much as they can because it's very important for them in order to rebuild. And the fact they're neck and neck amongst the farming community, which is big in Wales, shows that we're in for one hell of a political contest coming up inside the next 9 months. You've been texting and you've been calling. What do you think? Is Keir Starmer a disgrace to the farming community? Has he killed British farming with introducing his family farm tax? If you turned on the family farm tax like he has done partially on winter fuel cuts for pensioners, would you be willing to forgive and forget? 0344 499 1000. If you want to WhatsApp, call us or voice note, text the word TALK at the start of your message to 87222 and follow us on messages on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Great Britain. This is Jonathan Gullis here on the home of common sense, sitting in for Ian Collins. We have had texts, we have had calls, we've got voice notes, and we're going to get straight into another one here. I can't understand why we should pay inheritance tax when the family have already paid tax on everything they have bought. That's in reaction to the fantastic interview there with Gareth Jones, a superb farmer in Wales, who was saying that the family farm tax is killing British farming, and he doesn't think any inheritance tax should be paid ever. Another one here going, totally support the ban of music on public transport. The Conservatives' latest announcement that they would want to see fines for people who blare their music on buses and trains. I also detest people on loudspeaker gabbling on for ages. Kids on loudspeaker on tablets. This should also be extended to hospitals. My mum was on a ward with just been given a diagnosed with a stage 4 brain tumour. I'm so sorry to read that, Sally. To a woman, and was next to a woman with a tablet at the foot of her bed on a loudspeaker. Video call again, whittering on very loudly with kids running around the ward with no care or respect to anyone and staff just ignoring. What the heck has happened to respect? I think that's a very fair comment there. Another one here, Simon in Somerset. I think it's about time the NHS for British-born people went to private. Not like the USA, but something where each person pays and it's linked directly to their national insurance number, and nobody else can get treated without paying first or no treatment. That's simple. People coming into the countries like immigrants illegally to work should have to pay for treatment as well. Nothing would be for free. The prices would remain regulated to ensure fairness and reasonably cheap treatment. Simon from Dorset there. Another one here from Steve in Portsmouth. What the Conservative Party need to do now, if they are serious about coming out of the ECHR, we know that this is being trailed, that Kemi Badenoch will announce at Conservative Party conference in October the Conservatives will support leaving the ECHR, adopting what Reform UK's well-known position already is. That is common, it will be, and sorry to carry on from Steve in Portsmouth, that is common ground with the Reform Party. There is 4 years to go. We now need to see a gradual uniting of the right so we can combat what will happen, which will be a coalition of the left. So I will say unite the right. That's Steve in Portsmouth. Saqib Bharti not showing the desire there. Saqib Bharti, Conservative MP for Meriden and Solihull East, when he said Nigel Farage is a protege to Michael Foot. The Reform UK's announcement on their deportation is a copy and paste of Conservative Party policy. And it didn't sound like there was going to be any hugs and kisses exchanged between Conservatives and Reform as long as Saqib Bharti is concerned. Let us know what you think there. Another here from Glenn in Leeds. They can't even stop kids from vaping on the top deck of a bus. Never mind police music. Drivers are not allowed to leave the cab on the bus. So how is it enforced? Never gonna happen. I think that's the huge credibility issue with these type of policies that people rightly point out. John has texted in here. Again, it's all this law and that law, but enforcement is key. Same with shoplifters and all antisocial behaviour. That's again relating to and questioning whether or not we'll see those changes there. We have a voice note from Tristan, who wants to tell us how he thinks Keir Starmer, that top question of the day is Keir Starmer doing is Keir Starmer handling migration badly, yes or no? Tristan, what do you think?
This trafficker is right. The government have such a large majority. They could do so much, but they do absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's quite unbelievable, the majority they have and what they could actually do. So they could actually do so much, but they just refuse to. And the thing is, with the IMF knocking at the door, again, they could do so much. They could scrap net zero, they could stop giving away money, but again, they choose not to do it. And that's why I still think it's ideological. They are so against doing anything. Actions speak louder than words. And words that they say are just absolutely rubbish. This is the most pathetic, pitiful government ever.
I don't think I've ever heard so much despair in my life about a government, genuinely. I really struggle to see how this Labour government can continue to drag out their time in power over the next 4 years without the public getting more and more despondent. And I think there are going to be huge questions. As Saqib Bharti, Conservative MP again for Meriden and Solihull East, pointed out earlier, will Rachel Reeves be leading Labour as the Chancellor into the next general election? I don't think so. Will Sir Keir Starmer be leading Labour as the leader and Prime Minister of this country into the next general election? I think he will, but I think if he does, the Labour Party guarantee that they will definitely not win the next election. I think that they will run a fear campaign against Nigel Farage and hope that will allow them to remain the largest party and then get it back into government in some dodgy coalition with the Liberal Democrats. But again, I think the voters are also easily persuaded that there is no other choice but to go Reform UK. Then obviously the other question of what are we going to see in the budget this year? Is it a £20 billion black hole, as the IMF themselves estimate there currently is? That's not including the £9 billion of headroom that Rachel Reeves will have to give herself, so £30 billion. Or is it the £50 billion black hole? And there's only one way you feel that, is you're going to have to either make massive cuts in public spending or increase taxes, and this Labour government is choosing to not tell us what they think. Well, let's go to another caller. His name is Daniel. He's in Epsom. He wants to tell us about whether Keir Starmer is indeed handling migration well or not. Hello, Daniel.
Jonathan, great show. I love you on the station. Actually, you're doing a really good job.
You're very kind. I've got an amazing team behind the glass who babysit me, so I'm very grateful for that.
Nice, it's great. I just want to say that I think Keir Starmer and the Labour government's biggest problem is they seem to be at odds with the British majority. They seem to not want to listen or act on. When you consider, you was an MP and you worked for us, okay?
Yep.
And when for 25, 30 years, the British people have been saying to successive governments, we want illegal immigration stopped and we want legal migration cut down to extremely low numbers. We want you to be selective. And we've been ignored for nearly 2 generations now. And I think what's happening is that the British people realise they've had the urine extracted from them for too long, and we won't put up with it anymore. And you're going to see more and more civil unrest, and rightly so. And I think you're going to see more and more of the ordinary folk, people like me that are working out on Bank Holiday Monday right now, got my own small business. I think this Labour government are an absolute woeful, utterly useless. I mean, the standard of MPs in general is pretty low, but this particular crop in the Labour Party are abysmal. I think everything they do is ideologically driven. They're not smart. They haven't got the interests of the British people at heart. And we've had enough, Jonathan. Mass immigration from the third world is destroying the fabric of our country before our eyes. It's ruining the place. We can all see it. And we can see the decline and the degradation, and we won't put up with it anymore. If they don't act, we'll force them we'll force them out. The people have had enough, Jonathan. And everyone with eyes I'm 48. I grew up in London and I moved out because I didn't want to live there because it's a toilet. And we can see the decline and degradation before our eyes that third world immigration brings. And we don't want it anymore. We've had far too much immigration of all kinds for far too long, and it's got to stop.
Daniel, I hope one day you run for Parliament, because you were very eloquent, far more than I was, and I think you absolutely sum up how I feel about the situation too. Can I just ask you say you're a small business owner, is that correct?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Can I just ask what business you're working in?
Yeah, kind of like a home improvements industry.
Lovely.
So I work pretty much 7 days a week to provide for my family. But me, and like most of the silent British majority out there, have had enough. We've had enough of what... Go on.
Well, when Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves increased national insurance for employers, that means business owners like yourself, they said they weren't raising taxes on working people. Can I just check? You would consider yourself a working person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And all it does is you see, we have to understand in this country, it's private business that funds everything. It's private enterprise and private business that basically funds everything in society.
Yep.
So they came into power straight away, gave the public sector a massive pay rise without getting any kind of any kind of improvements. I mean, it's just, honestly, they couldn't run a bath. And we can all see that on the ground. It's not just immigration, but obviously immigration is the most obvious thing, because around our eyes, when we go to the towns and cities that we grew up in, we can see them turn to you-know-what in front of our eyes. And we all know the biggest contributing factor to that is third world immigration. And the economy's stifled. Law and order is not... London is not the town I grew up in the 70s and 80s. Common decency has gone. And that's why everyone I know, my entire family, we're all going to vote Reform, because we've seen successive governments. You should join Reform, Jonathan. You should.
No, I only laugh, sorry, because it's the most common question I receive. You
should.
I appreciate that people think I should be still relevant enough to return to frontline politics, having been part of that disastrous previous Conservative government.
Yeah, but the thing is, that's why the right won't align, because half of your old party are Lib Dems in blue ties. They're weak, they're concentrist, they're con-socialist. They won't do anything.
Well, Daniel, just I give you some evidence to back that up. Sakib Bharti, as in the Conservative MP, said earlier on the show that the Reform are just copying and pasting Conservative deportation plan. I reminded him that the deportation bill the Conservatives put forward, with this carving out elements of the Human Rights Act, which was a compromise from people like myself who think we should just scrap it, actually was amendments that we laid to the Safety of Rwanda, as it's now Act, prior to the general election, and it was Conservative MPs, around 70% of existing Conservative MPs, who walked through the lobbies shoulder to shoulder with Keir Starmer to vote against it. So like you, hence why I said to him, I struggle to believe the Conservatives were in power. They'd even deliver anywhere near what Nigel Farage is proposing, which is why I'm more interested in what he has to say on this issue.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we all know the Conservatives talked tough and did nothing. And it's because half of the people involved in the Conservative Party, or more, were wet, weak, con-socialist centrists. They shouldn't have even been in the Conservative Party. And that was why you've seen such a quick demise, because people cannot trust you. Listen, you were in for 14 years. I ran for the Conservative Party myself in Epsom and Ewell, and I would never do it again, because it's like the boy who cried wolf. You can't now come back and say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, because no one believes a word you're saying. And I've met Nigel on a couple of occasions in the Westminster Arms, and I've met him. He's got integrity. He believes what he says. That's why he never needs a script. And I think he'll deliver, and I'm behind him 100%. And I think it's high time that yourself, Rob Jemrick, and decent people join the Reform Party, because you know, we need the right people to come over to Reform, and that's the only way we get change. We won't get it with the Uni Party, I'm afraid.
In just 30 seconds, Daniel, if you don't mind, could you just tell me, are you not scared of what the charge would be against Nigel Farage, that he's promising huge tax cuts and increase in spending, like nationalising 50% of the water company, and yet has no clear plan how he's going to afford all that?
The thing is, Jonathan, I remember in 1997, under John Major's government, I remember before the Labour Party came in, I remember when this country was in the black. It had no debt. And then under Blair, we went up to 1.6 trillion, I think, and that's just got worse and worse and worse. You know, people are going, well, Nigel hasn't got a plan and he might overspend. What do you think's been happening for the past 25, 30 years? What do you think's actually been happening under the You've just, Daniel, summed up why I hear on Doors. Sorry, Daniel, just because I've got to make sure I get ready for the break. But thank you so much for your call and sharing all your views and thoughts. And that is the voice of the nation that we want to hear. And you call in 0344 499 1000. That's how you can also WhatsApp us and voice note us too. Text the word TALK at the start of your message to 87222. Or you can follow us and message on X at talkTV. After the break, I'm delighted to be joined by Isabel Oakeshott, who's going to be talking all about the latest crime stories happening up and down our country. So don't make sure you go anywhere than other to get a brew and sit back down and tune back into this common sense that is talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Great Britain. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Ian Collins here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. And what a great show we've been having so far. You've been texting, you've been calling, you've been voice noting. We've been talking about Sir Keir Starmer, pass or fail when it comes to handling illegal migration. The Conservatives, copying the Liberal Democrats, want to fine people who unfairly blare their music, or crap music to quote them directly, on buses and trains. We've also been talking to Gareth Wyn-Jones about the fact that farmers, 0% of farmers, are due to vote Labour in any future election. Has Labour killed British farming? Well, guess what? Coming up in the final hour of today's show, the Prime Minister is under mounting pressure over small boats and asylum hotels, with a poll showing 71% of voters, including 56% of Labour supporters, disapprove after more protests at the weekend. Meanwhile, a new report reveals a stark contrast in the UK job market, with nearly 1 million young Britons now out of work, while the number of migrants under 25 holding jobs has surged fourfold. And 140 people were arrested on the first day of Notting Hill Carnival for offences including assaults on police, robbery and possessions of weapons. That's up 40% on last year. You know what to do. You need to call 0344 499 1000. That's how you also WhatsApp us and voice note us too. Text the word TALK at the start of your message to 87222 and message and follow us on X at talkTV. Well, let's get to my next guest. Her name is Isabel Oakeshott. She is a great friend of ours here at Talk, with being Talk's international editor. Hello, Isabel. How are you?
Good afternoon. Well, I'm not kind of feeling that I should be at the Notting Hill Carnival. I mean, it just never sounds any fun, really, does it? It's just a carnival of kind of carnage, really.
Well, I was about to say, Isabel, nothing screams carnival like boarding up shops and houses and then arresting 100 people and securing over 40 knives and 11 guns the day before the carnival, right?
Just not really my idea of a great day out or a great weekend out. I've long thought that carnival, so-called carnival, is past its time, and I just think probably we should be looking at other forms of entertainment at this point.
Well, I mean, it's a concern, isn't it? Because I think Sunday was when we saw this 140 arrests taking place, and this is dubbed Family Day of all days for the public, where we saw 105 people arrested at the event and 35 on the approaches, with offences including drugs, weapons, and even 15 arrested for assaults on police officers, with one officer's hand being severely injured. I mean, as you say, it's a carnival of carnage rather than a carnival of celebration.
Yeah, and, you know, each and every year there are so many problems, and it does seem this year as if the authorities are a little bit more on top of it. They seem to be preempting trouble. They've used I think they've been using some new technology to try to sort of pick off and identify the known troublemakers. And I suppose that if this year's event passes with no actual stabbings and murders, like serious stabbings and anyone actually losing their life, well, that would be quite a victory for the Notting Hill Carnival. Every year, my heart sort of sinks as this thing comes around, and looking at aerial footage of it yesterday, I just thought it just doesn't look any fun. It's so unbelievably overcrowded, so dirty, just fundamentally dangerous. I'm not really sure why anyone goes.
Well, Alex Wilson, Assembly Member for Reform UK in the London Assembly, was talking about the serious threat of crush. There's, as you say, narrow streets where you've got over 1 million people descending on Notting Hill. I mean, this is why he would argue, and I think Reform's position is, move it at the very least to Hyde Park, make it a ticketed event, treat it like a Glastonbury essentially, where the money will be able to then pay for the security and help with any clear up and avoid the mass littering, urination on the streets, crime, as you say, vandalism on houses and shops that takes place that costs you and I as taxpayers to have to sort that out, especially when coppers from across the country are being drafted out of their natural communities to have to come down to London, meaning the streets of other places are being left more unsafe.
Yeah, exactly. And I know one of the other topics you wanted to talk about this afternoon was the epidemic of shoplifting. And doubtless, when police are already very thinly distributed and they're then diverted for events like this, it only makes that other stuff, the other kind of petty crime, and of course also through the ranks of crime, there's a knock-on effect. And the shoplifting thing, I think, is such an interesting one because it's that sort of very thin end of the wedge with crime. If you have a permissive attitude and approach towards the apparently small stuff, and I don't happen to think shoplifting is a small deal.
Yes.
I think it's actually a really big deal. But we've developed a system that treats it as a very minor, trivial matter. And that then percolates, I think, into a much wider attitude towards crime, the sense that you can get away with stuff that's smaller, and then you just keep pushing the boundaries and pushing the boundaries. And just looking into the shoplifting scourge, I was interested, I didn't actually realise this, that research suggests that around 70% of shoplifting is actually linked to drug addiction. And that is in no way to make it excusable, but it does shed some light, I suppose, on, well, obviously the source of the problem, but also other solutions. And those that have looked into this, and indeed those in the criminal justice system, have suggested that one of the ways we could tackle this, apart from deterrence, which, by the way, I think is very, very important, is just having a better and more efficient and comprehensive approach to addiction. At the moment, the NHS is so poorly set up to deal with addiction. I have some family experience of this, unfortunately. And, oftentimes there's just nowhere for addicts to turn. There isn't a system really that deals with the most serious end of addiction comprehensively. It's okay if you're wealthy. I mean, it's not actually okay under any circumstances.
Totally.
If you're wealthy, you can at least pay for rehab, but it's just not really there.
Isabel, you hit the nail on the head, and like you, family experience with, sadly, addiction and and serious mental health, and the system is just totally farcical when it comes to actually trying to get meaningful support without basically family members putting their lives to one side, impacting their ability to earn a living too and move forward without and having to step into the breach. And as you say, this shoplifting thing, actually, to be fair, the Liberal Democrats, who would have thought them getting tough on law and order? They've done the digging into the numbers, and they found a record 530,000 shoplifting offences were logged in England and Wales in the year to March 2025, with 289,000 cases ending up with no suspect, roughly 793 cases a day. Only 18% resulted in a charge or summons. The Met charged in just 6% of cases and closed 77% with not a single suspect. And we know there's groups like Crush Crime, for example, have been saying that we know 80% of crime is committed by around 10% of of individuals. So it's just looking bad. Lib Dem MP Josh Reynolds has called for advice for bystanders to confront shoplifters, which has been suggested as frightening and dangerous, and pushes scrapping police and crime commissioners to fund frontline policing. I never thought I'd say this, Isabel. I actually agree with the Liberal Democrat. I don't know what the point of a police crime commissioner actually is, and it seems a huge waste of taxpayer money.
Well, I am in favour of confronting shoplifters, or at least alerting the security staff in supermarkets, and I've done it myself, and was disappointed that the security staff did absolutely nothing. They just carried on chit-chatting and allowed this person, I think they sort of made towards the person as they left the shop, and then claimed that because the person had left the premises, there was nothing they could do. In fact, they had plenty of time to intervene before the person had left the premises and just didn't really want to. And the truth is that most of those security staff, not all, but most of those supermarket security staff are not paid very much at all. They're not necessarily trained for any kind of contact with individual shoplifters, and they're probably told basically don't try to tackle somebody if you catch them. And they are effectively ineffectively just scarecrows.
Well, another story, Isabel, with crime, is another gift I would suggest to Reform UK, is Prisons are due to apparently run out of spaces entirely by March unless more inmates are released early. So we've already seen, I think it was around 1,700 inmates released early. Now the government's been getting advice that suggests that in their sentencing bill that they're apparently preparing, they're going to abolish most sentences under 12 months to prison and replace them with tougher community penalties. They're pushing a Texas style, I'm sure they're trying to sound like they're Trumpian here, earned progression early release model. So well-behaved inmates can leave after 1/3 to 1/2 of their term. I suspect you and I both know that means 1/3, not 1/2. And spare places in the men's estate apparently have already dropped to just below 1,000 that's left in the system. I mean, Labour have released, I think, early now 26,500 people through the 40% standard determinate sentence scheme. That's the 10th of September 2024 and 31st of March. And I think they've actually recalled an extraordinary amount of those individuals too. The Home Office will, however, say, but we've got rid of 5,200 foreign national offenders. They've been deported since July 2024. That's a 14% increase in the previous 12 months. I mean, do you reckon, how's this going to play politically? I mean, it's a gift to Nigel Farage, right? When we say anyone with under a 12-month sentence is going to not go to prison at all. But Lucy Connolly puts out a very stupid tweet, deletes it and apologises within 4 hours, and she was sentenced to 31 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a joke, isn't it? And I just don't see the point of very extended, suspended prison sentences. Always found them very weird. You know, I'm sentencing you to a year in jail, except you don't actually have to be in jail. You can serve it at home unless you do something wrong, in which case you might go to jail and then you might get out, you know, after 1/3 of the time. All of this is a nonsense. Deterrence works. It really does work. You're always going to have a hardcore of people that have got such big problems that they commit crimes anyway. But you only have to live in countries where they mean business in their attitude towards tackling crime at all levels, from the pettiest thing to the most serious, to see that it is actually an effective way of doing things. If you've got a strong government and it takes the smallest of crimes seriously, you tend to have quite a safe society. And that's what I think we should be aiming for, not the opposite. We've just got to create more prisons until we create a culture that doesn't involve a casualness about petty crime.
And this is the problem, isn't it? Because the Conservative Party don't get to boast about this and try and use this as an albatross around Labour's neck. They're the ones who didn't build the prison spaces to be able to house more prisoners. And they themselves even released people, or at least some people even say they called the election before they had to release some people to avoid those optics. And then, of course, Reform UK have been criticised, I think, bizarrely for suggesting, well, can't we knock up some Nightingale-style prisons for these kind of smaller offences, even though I don't think any offence like you is small. But for those sentenced to 12-month sentence, you know, more of an open-style prison, you know, let's knock up these Nightingale prisons so that we can use those and, like you say, have still the deterrent of you will go behind bars, you will not be allowed to sit at home. I mean, it blows my mind that, like, as you say, someone like Hugh Edwards, literally found guilty of paedophilia and having indecent images of children, is allowed bail and given a suspended sentence. Lucy Connolly, as I say, does a very stupid tweet, knows she did a stupid tweet, deletes it after 4 hours, apologises for it. No, 31 months in prison and held on remand until her trial. I mean, it's just bizarre.
I think you make a really good point about, you know, offences against children, and far too often I read cases of individuals who have been found guilty of making indecent images, and in some cases, you know, very, very large numbers of images that have been found on their devices, obscene images, the creation of which at origin will have caused untold suffering and lifelong trauma to those little ones who are abused in that disgusting way. And yet, time and again, judges let these paedophiles walk free. I don't understand that. You know, to me, that is a multiple more dangerous and offensive to society than any white collar crime. You know, as you say, you mentioned Lucy Connolly. I'm sure that this government, that's going to be an albatross around their neck, that case. Maybe Keir Starmer has actually bothered himself to read up on the case now, because you may recall that he notoriously said some weeks ago that he wasn't familiar with it, which was either a lie or absolutely downright negligent of him as Prime Minister. So I just think that all of this can only really be addressed with quite a hard line rather than the opposite, which is what is being proposed by this government. You know, every turn they seem to suggest doing the precise opposite of what the majority of voters want.
It's so true, Isabel. I laugh because I'm sort of at the... I don't know what else to do. To be honest with you,
that's
anymore.
all we've got. You know, you just almost have to find it funny. I was sort of laughing at Angela Rayner in a canoe this morning. You know, the pictures are comical, aren't they? To encapsulate the state of our country. You know, I do really like Angela Rayner. I think she's got great spirit. I admire her life story and where she's come from to get where she is. But that image of her slouching in a kayak or whatever it was, vaping away, looking like a sack of potatoes, which she doesn't normally. You know, she's a glamorous lady, and it isn't generally about looks, but it's not really a very good image for our country, is it?
No. Some people would suggest that floating on a sort of blown up device on the water right now is the last thing that any
I couldn't
image
agree
is
more with
needed.
that. Just keep away from the rigid inflatable boats and anything else on the sea at this point.
And let Ed Davey be the clown who likes to throw themselves in the river and embarrass himself. Isabel, if I could just quickly ask you one final question. Saqib Bharti, Conservative MP for Meriden and Solihull East, was on earlier. I thought it was quite a punchy interview to sort of at Reform. It was the first time I've heard a Conservative MP actually come out swinging. He accused Nigel Farage of being a protege to Michael Foot and no longer being a Thatcherite. He obviously points and cites the fact that, for example, Nigel Farage wants to nationalise part of the water industry and is talking about lifting the two-child benefit cap. I mean, what you've been around British politics, is that a tack line that's going to stick? Is this something that Reform are going to have to think about when it comes to making sure the sums add up? Or do you think this will be seen by what I must say is lots of my texters and callers, is the Conservative Party can talk all they want. They're done. The voters don't trust them.
Well, I'll go along with the second, that the Conservative Party are done and no one is listening to anything they're saying. And I think comparisons with Michael Foot are really not going to resonate with the vast majority of people aged under, I don't know, 60. I mean, it's a bit of an old comparison, isn't it? When was Michael Foot? Far too long ago. I mean, most Reform voters, or a great deal of them, as you know, Jonathan, are in their 20s, in their teens. You know, Reform also has very, very solid support in the older demographic. But, you know, none of those teenagers that are drawn towards the party, none of those young people in their 20s have any idea about comparisons with Michael Foot. All they want is a strong leader that has solutions that instinctively feel as if they're going to work. And there's only, in my opinion, at this point, one party that is actually offering that. And that's not to just be biased. I'm very happy to give the Conservatives and Labour credit where it's due. I'm just really, really struggling to find any place where credit is due at this point. Otherwise, I would happily give it.
I agree with you, and what I find bizarre is there's this attack. Oh, Nigel Farage and Reform don't give us any detail. Well, they've produced now, I think, 2 different bills, literally drafted legislation, ready to go, albeit some would argue maybe over smaller bits of legislation. We're due, I think, tomorrow, the actual detail of this mass deportation bill from Reform UK, who have stuck their neck out and given us quite a substantive amount of what they're willing to do. But no one seems to really ever hold the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, particularly the Liberal Democrats, who could feasibly end up propping up a Labour government in some sort of coalition. We never seem to scrutinise those bills. In fact, the Conservatives seem to have been given a free pass to expect that we have no policies whatsoever, yet everyone bangs on about where's the detail from Reform. I mean, I remind people, we're only a year in. Last time I checked, we've got the manifesto still 2-3 years away at the very least.
Well, actually, you know, I'm not a member of Reform, but I am a Reform supporter, and obviously very, you know, actively so. I would take that level of scrutiny of Reform as a great badge of honour. It's a sign of how far the party's progressing, and I don't think the party leadership resents it at all. You know, the fact that they are being looked at so carefully shows just how seriously the media and the establishment and the opposition parties and indeed the governing party take the threat that is posed by Reform. So yes, they're under ridiculous level of pressure to produce detailed policies. It's daft to produce very detailed policies 4 years in advance of an election. We all know that things can change dramatically in 4 months, never mind 4 years. So Reform, if anything, is surprising me by how much they're coming out with. And as long as the pressure continues for them to do more and provide more detail, we will know that those calling for those details take reform very, very seriously, and rightly so.
Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your views. We really appreciate those. And what do you think, ladies and gents? Do you think it is an absolute disaster that we're about to see more prisoners released from prison early because the prison estate is not being built quick enough? Do we need to see Nightingale-style prisons built in order to house prisoners? Or are you happy with the idea of suspending all prison sentences for those under 12 months? Do you think shoplifting is in a depressing state of affairs? Do you agree with the Liberal Democrats? It's time to scrap police crime commissioners and use that money instead to lock up people who shoplift. And then finally, the Notting Hill Carnival. On Family Day, 140 arrests were made. 15 assaults on police officers. Is Notting Hill needing to either be closed or moved to Hyde Park, or leave it as it is? 0344 499 1000 if you want to call in, if you want to WhatsApp, if you want a voice note. Text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and follow us and message on X at talkTV. I'll see you soon.
The reality is that this country is built on the backs of those small businesses. Our entire economy is built on it. They fund the public services that everybody uses. And by taxing them to death, as we've seen by this Labour government, whether it be that national insurance increase, that jobs tax, we know what that's costing businesses. You've just heard a horrific example of that bill. The employment rights bill, or whatever Labour want to brand it, that's going to put more red tape on employers and make it even harder to create jobs. The reality of throwing people on the scrap heap, taking them out of work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for Ian Collins here today with you between 1 and 4 before we hand over to Peter Cardwell to take you through, Jeremy Kyle to take you through drive time. I apologise, the team behind the glass only looked shocked. They thought there'd been some sort of weird reshuffle. I apologise, Peter's already done the show. Doesn't want to come back and do another one. He needs to have a lie down. Like me, he's been doing the weekend too. So let's get to some breaking news. Very interestingly, Peers in the House of Lords, who failed to show up and take part in the House of Lords, face being forced out under sweeping reforms Labour is drawing up to slim down the House of Lords chamber. A new retirement age of 80 will also be introduced, requiring nearly 200 members to step down. The reforms, backed by Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, aim to cut the unelected chamber by a fifth. What do you think of that? Is this something that you welcome? We've heard before Nigel Farage say he would like to abolish the House of Lords. The Conservative Party are against, I think, the abolition of those peers, for example, who are there via sort of the peers that are there sort of by what's the exact word? Peerage or something? Not peerages. I'm an idiot, I know, sorry, the word's gone from my head. But anyway, the peers who are kind of anointed to go there rather than the ones that are selected by politicians, I think they're opposing that reform by Labour. Look, I think this is quite good common sense. I think the House of Lords should be a chamber where we could go and get the brightest and the best from around the world, experts in their industry. We give them a title, which is what they would love. They have to do 10 years service where they just scrutinise legislation, don't actually introduce legislation, and we get their expertise. That could be some tech business boss from Silicon Valley over in the US. It could be some German engineer. It could, and hopefully will be, full of great British expertise, people like James Dyson coming in to help us understand how we could improve maybe skills and technical education in our country. And I think if you do 10 years, then we find the next generation of those people taking over in those eras. People keep a title, which at the end of the day is what will make them happy, because when you've got someone who's been that successful, makes that much money, it's not about the cash, it's about something that you can't buy, and the peerage is one of those things. So I think that will be a great thing indeed. Let's see what happens with that. We've also been getting texts coming in as well. We've got a text here from Alison in Dorset, or Paul in Dorset. I enjoy listening to you, Jonathan, very much over the last couple of weeks. Regarding Angela Rayner, you've just said she's entitled to the Grace and Favour pad. Yes, this is the Admiralty House flat that she's got, yet she's wealthy enough to own 2 other properties. In this case, the system of providing homes for senior politicians is totally wrong. Clearly, these homes, number 10, Admiralty House, etc., were granted to enable and support MPs' work from within our capital city when they were just working class and lived away from London. If they're now capitalising as a result of the system, or benefits that are in place and offered within parliamentary roles, whilst us poor worker bees suffer, then Parliament is no longer fit for purpose. A very interesting perspective, Alison, on that. I do think... I just think for government ministers of that level of seniority, they're going to have something, because you're going to sometimes be calling them in the middle of the night to attend emergency meetings on national security and defence stuff alone. But I understand the sentiment of what you're saying. If people are able to get rich whilst being MPs, and you know, Angela Rayner is now able to afford a £700,000 to £800,000 luxury pad in Hove, Brighton way, so... You know, does she really need Admiralty House too? Is there another maybe Labour frontbencher who could use it instead? Another one here, agree 100% with Gareth Wyn-Jones. I live in Wales and look forward to the elections in May next year. I'm sure Labour are done here. They have ruined Wales, but I'm hoping Plaid Cymru doesn't get votes as well. They have been in bed with Labour from start, useless, woke and pro-migration, dangerous party. That's from Ffion in Wales. We know there's big elections. Gareth Wyn-Jones telling us about that amazing poll that showed 0% of farmers polled would vote for Labour in a future general election. Well, let's go to a caller. His name is Mark. He's also in Wales, in South Wales to be more accurate, and he wants to talk about migration, whether Keir Starmer is doing the job well or badly. Hello there, Mark.
Hiya, Jonathan. If you're a bit of a cynic, and it is a character failing I sometimes display, you could argue that from Labour's point of view, not the country's, but Labour's point of view, he's doing a bang-up job on immigration. He's successfully making out to be so inept and useless at controlling migration that all of our focus is on the small boats. Meanwhile, in the background, hundreds of thousands of people are coming every single year on so-called legal routes. And some of these people we may well need, I mean, doctors, engineers, but the latest figures I've been able to find on the ONS website say that in the year up to the end of December 2024, there were 424,000. And I'm sorry to kick you any down, Jonathan, but we do know that 1 year when the Conservatives were in power, nearly 1 million came.
It's a disgrace, by the way, Mark. Just so you know, I'm appalled, embarrassed, disgusted by our record when it comes to both legal and illegal migration.
Good man. But we just simply cannot afford these numbers. We're a small island. We're, thanks to a lot of this immigration, a very crowded island. And more to the point, we're a skint island. And not only is these huge numbers changing our national character, but also our infrastructure, what's left of it, is strained far beyond breaking point. With how to deal with these numbers, is there any wonder there's a problem with housing, access to health, access to education? Now, I don't blame anybody for wanting to come come and live in our country. In many ways, it's still a great country to be. But we just cannot afford to keep increasing our population by these vast amounts. And these figures for the legal migration far outstrip the small boats. I mean, in comparison, they are literally a drop in the ocean. And like I
And
say,
just to back you up, sorry there, Mark, well, actually, when it comes to illegal migration, the biggest factor in illegal migration is those people who did come legally and get a visa, but have then overstayed as their visas expired. So you are right, legal migration is actually the real issue here.
Yeah, I mean, we all know about students who come on a student visa, never ever attend a lecture and disappear into the black economy. There were headlines not so long ago about all these people who came on care worker visas, and they've never been able to trace any of them actually having a job in the care sector. It just goes on and on. The Home Office admitted recently they managed to lose track of 150,000 people. I mean, it just can't go on. It really can't. And we need to be talking about this. Migration needs to be looked at, legal and illegal, in the round. We need to be asking these questions and actually having a policy that covers all of it. By sleight of hand, it's like watching a conjurer. Keir Starmer is, I mean, he can't be that inept. I mean, if he was that bad, you wouldn't trust him to sit the right way around in a lavatory, never mind run a country. But it's like a conjurer. He's showing you his right hand, while in the background, his left hand's doing all the work.
Indeed. Well, look, Mark from South Wales, thank you so much for that call and sharing your thoughts. And you can be like Mark, 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us on that number too, and indeed send us a voice note. You can also text in the word talk to 87222 at the start of your message. And you can also for message and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, we'll be talking to Ben Gregg. He is from the Centre of Social Justice, who have done an impressive report showing that very tragically nearly 1 million young people, that's 16 24-year-olds, are not in any form of education, employment or training. That's about 1 in 8 young people. Yet at the same time, there has been a huge surge in the amount of non-EU under 25 workers in Britain. Are you shocked? Then we'll find out and learn more from Ben about what's causing this after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Ian Collins here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm delighted to be sharing stories with you, like the next one that we go to with Senior Fellow Ben Gregg from the Centre for Social Justice, who's done a very impressive report. And Ben joins me down the line. Hello, Ben. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, Ben, it says here, the Centre for Social Justice says that youth disengagement is nearly 1 million. It counts 923,000 NEETs, not in education, employment or training. And that's for 16 to 24-year-olds, and about 1 in 8. It says that since January 2020 to December 2024, that's going to be a Conservative Party legacy there, the number of payrolled non-EU under 25 workers rose by, and ladies and gents, believe me when I say this, 315%, while the number of Brits under 25 on the payroll fell from minus 49,000 to over 2020 to 2024, and to 119,000 down in the last year alone. Growth in young migrant hires is concentrated predominantly, you're saying, in retail and hospitality, with the recent squeeze coming as the CSJ links, I think, a further 35,000 drop in under 25 unemployment since April 2025 due to high payroll costs. That will be regarding employers' national insurance alongside rising benefit claims and migration. The CSJ's got Lord Blunkett, former Labour Home Secretary, and Sir Jeremy Hunt, Conservative MP and former Chancellor, to unite in the idea of maybe a future workforce credit, which means paying employers 30% of a NEET's salary. That's, again, not in education, employment or training. Half up front, half after 6 months, aiming to move 120,000 of those into work in year one, costing around 670 million, which should hopefully bring the Chancellor 765 million in a net fiscal gain via, obviously, tax and lower welfare. Ben, how serious is this challenge for young people?
I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have in this country. I mean, so the 923,000 young people who are not in education, employment or training, that figure actually went up in the most recent data. So it's 948,000, which is the second worst figure we've had in, I think, about a decade. I think the previous, the one that comes in even worse was, I think, the data in December 2024. So we're looking at a lot of young people who are out of work, they're not in education, they're not in training, they're completely sort of disengaged from the job market. And as you say, we believe this is coming from a sort of toxic cocktail we talk about of rising employment costs, of a migration system that is giving employers a sort of easy opt-out from what is a bit of a risk sometimes of taking on a young person and investing in them, and from a welfare system that just isn't incentivizing people to get into work in the way that it should. So we're calling for, like you say, the future workforce credit, an effective tax cut for businesses that take on these needs. We also want to see a lot more ambition in the government's employment support packages, and we also want to see sort of various other changes to help sort of support these young people back into the job market and back into engagement.
The Centre for Social Justice, I know, put out a report ahead of that critical welfare vote suggesting an idea that was to remove people with mild anxiety, depression and ADHD from receiving any sort of payment financially, and instead invest $1 billion of the $8 billion saving from that into creating over, I think, 4,000, it might be 40,000, one of those numbers is correct, additional talking therapies. And at the same time also has been long pushing about the fact that particularly white working class boys and girls from free school meal backgrounds, we've seen that Lost Boys report, again, a huge report by the Centre for Social Justice, indicating again just how bad the education outcomes and attainment are, leaning that lots of those young people are falling into being neat. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, is now coming out swinging, saying it's a disgrace, basically, and a disappointment, and the state needs to do more to support these people. I mean, is this the problem, though, that, again, the CSJ is seeing? We've kind of, the government's saying the right thing, but then there's this element over here of the increasing national insurance has obviously had a knock-on impact in the sector, still high levels of net migration, and of course the welfare system that wasn't even able to have $5 billion shaved off it. This is why I suppose ideas like this are necessary if you're going to incentivise in any way and not U-turn on anything that you've done so far.
Yeah, I guess part of it is saying that the government in certain areas is heading in the right direction, or doesn't always have sort of the courage of their convictions. So one example is the employment support scheme we want to see expanded is something called Connect to Work, and the government included that in its sort of welfare plans that they wanted to expand it, but they only want to expand it by 100,000 placements, when sort of the numbers we're dealing with are obviously a lot higher than that. And so the question that we're trying to ask is, well, how can you invest in that more? How can you improve that? So we echo the recommendation we made previously around how you save in the welfare system through reforming some of the eligibility criteria around mental health conditions in universal credit and PIP, but then reinvesting that, like you say, in talking therapies, and also investing that in expanding Connect to Work. Because I think what's really important not to lose here is actually for people who have less severe mental health conditions, how much that's often caused it's not a simple sort of a biochemical problem that you have or you don't. It's often very strongly contributed by social factors. I mean, when we were talking to charities, they were talking about how sort of the young people they're dealing with are isolated, how they lack community, how that's leading to sort of this disenfranchisement and loss of trust. And actually part of what we're saying is it's almost not helpful for the benefit system to instead sort of leave them where they are, but actually saying re-engaging with society, being part of community, the importance of work for that is helpful for you to dealing with these issues. And it's not actually a particularly compassionate thing to instead say, we're just going to leave you where you are and kind of focus our attention on that rather than on how we can support you, how we can give you talking therapies, how we can get you into the workplace.
And Ben, I'm just curious to understand, have you figured out what's fueled, I mean, a 315% rise in non-EU under 25 workers in this country? Why has there been such a massive rise in that particular worker? Is it because, for example, we offer in the shorter skills scheme a third off essentially the cost of employing someone in terms of their wage? Is that a drive factor, or is it just a symptom of the last Conservative government in particular, and this current Labour government not seemingly doing too much either yet on just basically having quite an open border system?
Yeah, so I would be slightly nervous of kind of making bold claims because, I mean, in terms of what in the migration system is driving this rise itself isn't something I was sort of looked into massively in this report. But I think it's just really to emphasise that what we are seeing is, as you say, that increase, and I think there's sometimes an illusion that the increase is coming in sort of sectors where we don't have labour to fill them, where it's kind of necessary and needed, and particularly sort of the skills shortage list trying to exemplify that. But what we're actually seeing is that list is too broad, and that where employment is rising most, particularly among 16 to 24-year-olds, non-EU migrant 16 to 24-year-olds, the number one sector that's in is in accommodation and food, and then the sectors closely following it include retail and sort of not industries that are kind of that necessarily you would expect to be on that list, and particularly industries where actually, if you're a young person and you're just getting started in the job market, particularly if you've not gone on to university or you've not sort of got as many qualifications, these are often the sectors where you would get started, where you would get job experience, and that would sort of be an entryway.
Ben Gregg there, Senior Fellow for the Centre for Social Justice, with that incredible report that shows just this dire situation that we tend to find young British people in this country. What do you think about the fact that we've nearly got 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds not in any form of education, employment or training, whilst at the same time seeing a 315% increase in non-EU workers at 16 to 24 entering, for example, the hospitality and retail sector? Is this yet again another example of mass migration out of control and not having a proper discussion and a proper investment in getting our young people into those jobs that are just as important as someone who wants to go and be a graduate from university? 0344 499 1000 is how you can call, WhatsApp and voice note. Text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and message and follow us on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
police force is completely and utterly wrapped up in dealing with that. So it's a great weekend to be a burglar, because you know there's no police anywhere near South London, for example. You don't have to worry about that. If you want to go anywhere near and rob anybody down sort of in North London, that's going to be fine too, because they're all at Notting Hill. You know, the whole thing is a complete disaster, and they're all terrified of saying this thing is a waste of space, it creates criminality, it encourages people to fight the police, and it should be shut down because, quite frankly, it's not even British.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins. Very shortly, I'll be handing over to Jeremy Kyle, JK, who will take you through the big stories of the day and continue where we've been going, which is Keir Starmer. 7 in 10 of you think he's been a complete and utter failure on tackling small boats, smashing gangs, migration. Do you agree, yes or no? Big Ange enjoying 3 pads now. Do you think it's right that she's allowed a luxury pad in Hove when she's been calling this type of thing a disgrace for those buying up on the coast, whether that be in Devon or Cornwall, and pricing people out the housing market? A house that she will admit herself will lay vacant for a large portion of the year while she's busy in Westminster and back in her Ashton-under-Lyme constituency. Do you think that Labour is lawless and allowing London Place, for example, to get even worse? We've got Notting Hill Carnival, 140 arrests made on so-called Family Day, up 40% on the year before, as well as looking at the fact they're about to release even more prisoners onto our streets by scrapping custodial sentences for anyone offending under 12 months. Yet Lucy Conley gets 31 months in prison. Hugh Edwards, a convicted paedophile, gets a suspended sentence. Are we living under two-tier Keir? Well, I've got a caller that I know you love, and I love her too. Her name's Georgina. She's in London, and she's going to tell me what she thinks, and you know she will say it as it is. Georgina, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Jonathan. It's wonderful to see you back on the show. How marvellous is this? I've got a few things that I want to say about the present government. I'm going to rant on a little bit. If I get too much for you, just turn me off. May I start?
Oh, please do, Georgina, please do.
Thank you. Well, we can't believe a word Keir Starmer says with regard illegal migration. They make it sound like a nigh-on impossibility to leave the ECHR, when in reality it isn't that difficult at all. The only difficulty being that they need to want to stop illegal migration, and they don't. The people of Britain are now looking upon this influx of migrants as a Trojan horse, Jonathan. And when you see these people breaking into our country, being given luxury accommodation, 3 square meals a day, and that's without all the other perks, which, might I add, the taxpayer are paying for, whilst our own soldiers have to buy their own kit and boots. We have no defence fund, and the British people are being taxed to the hilt. Remember, an army marches on its stomach, and it's the migrant stomachs that are full, Jonathan, whilst our own are going without. Remember that charity begins at home, and also remember that when you import third world people, you import third world problems, and we have evidence of that every day. We're not going to get our economy up and running again unless we stop paying out for these unwanted illegal migrants, as the bill is growing daily, and our government now has to go to the IMF with their cap in hand for a payout, as we are on the verge of bankruptcy. Our country and culture is dying, we are sick of empty promises and need deliverance. This, to me, is of cause for great concern. We have not heard Keir Starmer mention anything about the unrest that's been going on all over the country with regard to this problem, and it will only escalate further until he actually faces up to it and accepts responsibility for the fact that his smashing the gangs policy has worked about as well as every other policy in his manifesto, which is not at all. Britain and the British people must be the main priority of our government, and they must come first before any illegal migrant, especially in the present economic climate where our own people are going without. To me, this government is unfit for purpose. We have a globalist Prime Minister that we can't believe and who makes us look weak and incompetent on the global stage, a Chancellor of the Exchequer who cannot do basic maths, and a hypocritical Deputy Prime Minister who has a do as I say, not as I do attitude. It's high time they admitted defeat and that they cannot turn the problems of this country around, and we need to call for a general election as soon as possible before we reach our PNR.
I'm going to annoy the camera operator here. I'm standing up and applauding you, Georgina, just so you know. That, ladies and gentlemen, I think sums up everything that we need to know. There we go. Georgina, there's nothing to say. You've nailed it again. And if the Talk social media team don't put that out as a clip and just say, do you agree with Georgina, yes or no, I don't know what they won't clip. That was, well, I think you need to call back in. I think we need to play that to Jeremy Kyle later on, see what he thinks, because I think he'll love hearing what you say. Thank you so much, Georgina, there for sharing your views on this disastrous Labour government. What a powerful interaction that is, and this is why I love this show. This is why I love the British people calling in, voice noting in, texting in. And we have another voice note. Steve, who wants to tell us about Labour. Maybe we'll hear something positive.
We have a Labour Party, a government that is globalist in nature. It's part of the international socialist idea. So it's no surprise that they go against homegrown produce by farmers in this country. They'd rather import it from what they perceive as poor farmers in Africa or South America. Likewise with our energy infrastructure, where Miliband would rather buy it in China and make them richer, rather than use our own resources here, oil and gas and shale gas.
I mean, it would be nice if you get a voice note of someone out there want to tell us what Labour's doing right. Anyone out there. SOS for Labour supporters anywhere who want to tell us that Keir Starmer and his Labour government are doing another good job. Again, Steve, I couldn't agree with you more. I have no idea. I'm exhausted with constantly agreeing with everyone. John and crew, maybe he'll say something positive.
Yes, hopefully, and I won't call you Duck, Jonathan.
Oh, well, you don't mind if you do, my friend. I know it's normally a term of endearment for a woman, but I'll accept it, don't you worry.
Well, you can guess where I come from anyway.
Indeed.
The point I want to make, well, I've got two. One I have already made 2 years ago to Mike Graham, and it was the answer to this illegal immigration. It's very easy. And I can quickly tell you what they should do. It applies today just as much as before. They should go, when they arrive, don't pay the French, go to the Ascension Isles, put them on a plane. You can get 800 on a jumbo jet, properly converted. The Ascension Isles, because it's British, you wouldn't have the lawyers having a good case against them. It's already got the infrastructure, it's got long runways, it's got a port. You can house these people in 20 to 40-foot converted containers. You could feed them. The people that were genuine, perhaps 1% of these that come over, they would survive, they could be fed, and you could wait until they're properly checked before they're allowed here. That said, if they can escape, they've got a few hundred miles to swim, and it's shark infested. So I think that is the place we should be looking at.
John, can I quickly ask you? So obviously Nigel Farage has said he is willing to use the Ascension Islands. Does that give you confidence to think Nigel Farage is the only ones being honest about how to solve this migrant crisis?
Well, I would say I've followed Nigel Farage for quite a while, and the one thing that annoys me with him is normally proved to be right. We're so lucky as a country to have such a good politician, even though it's vilified by the press all the time. And it's going to get worse as we get near an election. They will find anything against him if they possibly can. But he's the star man, and he's been right. Whatever you look at, if it was COVID, HS2, he's got the foresight here. And he's right with the Ascension Isles. In my opinion, it will take more than days. It might take 2 or 3 weeks. They will stop coming. And we don't need to pay the French. We don't need to try and discourage them. We could encourage them to come here because they won't want to if that's where they end up.
Betty has texted in. Thank you so much, John, from Crew there. Betty's texted in. If you're an economic migrant, why would you leave your family behind? Go make money, send it home, then set yourself up and bring them over. Why wouldn't you do that? That's the difference. The 17% of women and kids are the real cases in terms of when Matthew Torbett earlier on was saying about going on. Jeremy, so I was standing and clapping. I've got Jeremy Carl now in the studio with me.
Hold on a minute. If you were, right, in a bomb-strewn place, why would you leave your wife and kids and come over on your own anyway?
This is what I said. I mean,
Rubbish,
you just wouldn't,
man.
would you?
No, of course you wouldn't.
It's total rubbish.
Anyway, that's not the main news. The main news is, and JG, you are right, seriously, on the plinth, OK? We can talk about immigration, Starmer and asylum hotels. We need to talk about three things. The Minister for Housing herself and nobody else, Angela Rayner. Where did she get an £800,000 mortgage from?
It's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
I thought you could only get 3 times your salary. She's on 80,000 as an MP.
She's done very well, let's not forget, Jeremy, from buying a property through the schemes that she wants to axe in Ashton-under-Lyme, that then has been doubled in price since then. And now, like you say, an 800,000 luxury pad in Hove. Remember, Labour said it's disgusting that people in coastal communities are losing out on housing because rich folk from London are buying them up to use them as holiday homes.
There's also, we have to be sympathetic this afternoon about Gen Z because so many of them are now returning to the office because they feel lonely at home.
Who could have predicted this was going to happen?
But my favourite story, and I wanted to put you on the spot. When you tragically lost your seat...
Yes.
Did your local Conservative Association send you a leaving card?
No, I had a text.
Have you seen this story?
No, I haven't.
This is brilliant, man. A Ministry Defence worker at NATO headquarters is suing NATO for harassment after he wasn't given a good luck card when leaving his jobs. James Ailes was so upset he's got PTSD. He says his life is on the line because Jonathan Gullis, if you're not watching online, is doing what I do. He's so stressed by not being, go on, JG, by giving a leaving card that it's ruined his life. Look at Jonathan Gullis.
He works for NATO. NATO.
Yes, man. He
literally like an actual military organisation designed to defend the West. And
he's got PTSD, depression, anxiety and paranoia because his colleagues didn't give him a leaving card. He thinks it's disrespectful.
The West has fallen. The West has fallen. God forbid Russia really want to go for it with China. Because if this is the people in NATO...
This is NATO.
And we've already buggered our armed forces by filtering out under the last Conservative government, which just haunts me to this very day. I
must say, and I mean this, you know I love the bones of you. It's so good to have you on. I think you're great.
No, thank you. Well, you know what? The listeners, I had Saqib Bharti earlier on who said reform. Nigel Farage is just, he's shadowing Michael Foot, not challenging